Chapter 112. The next day, Ling Shiqi and Yushu brought 10 people to the meeting place. This place was close to the Crimson Tower and far away from the other factions, so they didn't have to worry about it. After all, these 4 factions had clashed with each other more than once or twice. Their accumulated hatred had reached a point where it was difficult to resolve. If it wasn't for the Crimson Tower hanging over their heads, they wouldn't be sitting together peacefully. When they arrived, Ling Shiqi saw a round table in the distance. 4 people were already seated there. One of them was smiling and saying something, but the others all had serious expressions and didn't seem to have any intention of speaking. When they saw Ling Shiqi and Yushu arrive, a young man in a blue robe stood up and walked over. This was the leader of the Qingyan League and the organizer of this meeting, Qingyan. Qingyan walked over with a warm smile and said, "So it's Leader Yu and Vice Leader Dark Crow. Qingyan welcomes you with open arms. Please take a seat." Yushu exchanged a few pleasantries with him and sat down. Ling Shiqi followed closely behind. As for the 10 people who came with them, they stayed where they were. After they sat down, the 2 began to exchange meaningless pleasantries. The 2 of them had found their opponents and began to flatter each other endlessly. Ling Shiqi glanced at the others. The young man across from him sat next to Qingyan but slightly behind him. He was Qingyan's right-hand man, Yan Feilin, who was at the 8th level of the pure spirit realm. The young man to Ling Shiqi's right was Hingming. He sat there expressionlessly with 2 strange purple scimitars at his waist. When he saw the 2 scimitars, Ling Shiqi was secretly envious. More than a month ago, Ling Shiqi had also fought with Hingming. Although he won, his scimitars were left with 2 thin cracks. He had been injured by Meng Ming's level 4 spirit tool. Ling Shiqi had even planned to assassinate Hingming, but he was too cautious and could not find a suitable opportunity. Ling Shiqi was slightly surprised by the person sitting next to Hingming. He was Extreme Evil. He was the leader of the Triad Alliance, Extreme Evil, who led the Ling Shiqi to the silver-scaled fire-armored crocodile 3 months ago. Unexpectedly, after a few twists and turns, he actually ran to Seiji. Extreme Evil and Hengming were both at the 9th level of the pure spirit realm. At this moment, the people from the 3 major forces were all here. Only Blood Moon was left. Not long after, the Delta Origi also arrived. Even from afar, she didn't hide her powerful aura of the spirit transformation realm. Qingyan let out a soft snort. His spirit force moved and the same aura of the spirit transformation realm surged out. 2 powerful auras collided with a loud bang, stirring up a gust of wind, blowing the gravel under their feet. However, Ling Shiqi sensed that although Qingyan's aura looked very powerful at first glance, it was a bit lacking. In fact, there was even a faint sense of impatience in his aura. It seems that he did indeed rely on external items to forcefully break through. Ling Shiqi thought to himself. However, he didn't understand why the Delta Origi would so openly announce that she had broken through to the spirit transformation realm. Ling Shiqi knew that the Delta Origi had the aura concealment technique. She could completely hide her cultivation and use it at a critical moment to catch others off guard. However, since the Delta Origi had made such a choice, she must have her reasons. Ling Shiqi didn't ask too much. Moon Lord Blood Moon's cultivation is indeed profound. Please take a seat. Qingyan took the initiative to disperse his spirit pressure and laughed. However, there was a layer of sweat on his palms hidden in his sleeves. The Delta Origi also withdrew her spirit force and raised her chin like a proud white swan before sitting down. Chen looked at her with respect but didn't sit down. Instead, he stood respectfully behind the Delta Origi. Seeing that everyone was here, Qingyan said, "Everyone, it has been a year and a half since we arrived on the Blood Fog Island. There were more than 10,000 people who came here, but what about now? Only 100 or so people remain. It can be said that those who have survived until now are 1 in 100, and the few of you here are 1 in 1,000. I believe in your talent, perseverance, and... Just as Qing Yan was talking, Xiongming suddenly said, "Get to the point." Qing Yan's expression darkened when Xiongming interrupted him so rudely, but he didn't lose his temper. Instead, he continued, "In short, none of you want to die, right?" Everyone's expressions changed when they heard this. That's right, these people could be said to be the most powerful people on the Blood Fog Island. They enjoyed large amounts of resources and constantly worked hard to improve themselves. Why? Was it for the so-called power of the guild master? Perhaps, but definitely not all of it. This was because they knew that these were all rootless waters. If they couldn't leave the island, then it wouldn't take long for them to be devoured by the endless void. Their ultimate goal was to get out alive. This blood-red tower was the last obstacle that stood in their way. Qing Yan continued, "Based on the current situation, the blood-red sky will shrink to where we are in about a month's time. In other words, we must enter the Blood Fog Tower in a month. There are 4 entrances to the Blood Fog Tower. I'm sure everyone knows this, but I suggest that we work together to enter one of the entrances. That way, we'll be able to gather the strength of everyone on the Blood Fog Island, and our chances of survival will increase exponentially." Qing Yan carefully observed everyone's expressions after saying this. However, each of them was smarter than the other, and none of them showed any emotion. Ling Shiqi and Yushu looked at each other, and the former secretly signaled with their eyes that they couldn't agree. Putting everything else aside, who would they listen to if the 4 forces joined forces? The leaders of these factions were all proud and arrogant people, and none of them would refuse to listen to anyone else. In addition, they couldn't forget that there had been many fierce conflicts in the past 3 months. Even if they forced themselves to work together, they wouldn't trust each other at all. Delta Origi was the first to object. "I don't agree. Qing Yan League leader, if this is all you want, then I'll take my leave." "I don't agree either," said Meng Shiqi. Yushu also spoke up. "That's right. Since there are 4 entrances to the Blood Fog Tower, each of us can have one. Why should we force ourselves to work together? Plus, everyone knows that even if we work together, we won't trust each other." "You..." Qing Yan didn't expect the other 3 to reject him so decisively. At this moment, his face turned gloomy. Chapter 113. When Qing Yan saw that the others had rejected his suggestion so decisively, he shouted, "You'll regret this." As soon as he finished speaking, a few dozen figures vaguely appeared in the distance and surrounded them. Hengming silently gripped the hilt of his saber. Extreme Evil said, "What? Does the Qing Yan League leader want to keep us here?" The atmosphere in the room became tense. Qing Yan stared at Extreme Evil, then suddenly struck out with his palm. A powerful palm energy mixed with a scorching heat swept over. Extreme Evil was shocked, but he did not panic. He struck out a few times in succession, and the wind generated by his palms was not weak either. But when Azure Flame's palm force met Extreme Fiend's palm force, it immediately crushed it as easily as crushing dry weeds. Extreme Evil's expression finally changed, and he hurriedly backed away. At this moment, Hengming moved and struck out with his sabers. 2 sharp sabers completely shattered the last of the palm energy. Hengming's eyes were filled with killing intent as he stared straight at Qing Yan. Qing Yan said, "Don't worry, I don't mean any harm." As soon as he finished speaking, he struck out with his palm again. And his target was Ling Shiqi. You still want to show off." When Ling Shiqi saw Qing Yan attacking Extreme Evil and himself, he knew what Qing Yan was planning. Faced with Qing Yan's powerful palm energy, Ling Shiqi also struck out with his own palm energy. The palm energy was not strong, but it brought about a strong gust of wind, and within the gust of wind, there was also a trace of coldness. The scorching palm energy and the cold gust of wind collided, and a sizzling sound was heard. The two forces, one hot and one cold, were evenly matched. Qingyan's heart sank, and he felt a little embarrassed. He secretly increased his strength, but the result was that he still could not defeat Ling Shiqi. At that moment, Yushu stood up, his hand gripping the hilt of his saber. It seemed as though he would attack at any moment. Seeing this, Qingyan withdrew his palm with a gloomy face. Ling Shiqi stood silently beside Yushu. At this moment, Seiji and the Yushu clan members were pressuring Qingyan. If Qingyan dared to attack again, they would join forces and attack him. He didn't seem to fear a spirit transformation realm expert at all. Qingyan was also in great pain. He originally planned to display his strength as a spirit transformation realm cultivator to intimidate the Seiji and the Yushu clan. He wanted them to know how powerful he was and that cooperating with him was the wisest decision. His targets were not Hengming and Yushu, but Extreme Evil and Ling Shiqi. However, he didn't expect to lose to Ling Shiqi. Although they were evenly matched, he was one realm higher than Ling Shiqi. This result made it seem as if he, a spirit transformation realm cultivator, was not very powerful. As a result, he couldn't say what he wanted to say. He could only watch them leave with a dark expression. Before Extreme Evil left, he said to him, "I thought the Qingyan League's leader was very powerful, but it seems like he's only so-so." Qingyan didn't speak, but his fists were clenched tightly. No one had expected the meeting to end so quickly. The main reason was that everyone had vaguely guessed Qingyan's purpose before coming. They wanted to get some information from him, but it ended before they could do anything. If it was just Yushu and Qingyan, it might have been possible. However, Delta Origi and Hengming were not the type to chat for half a day. They both went straight to the point, which led to the gathering ending so quickly. However, after everyone left, Ling Shiqi and Delta Origi secretly met. They exchanged information about the blood-colored tower as soon as they arrived, but unfortunately, there was nothing valuable. After all, no one could get close to the blood-colored tower. Ling Shiqi said with a serious expression, "We will enter the blood-colored tower in a month." Delta Origi's expression was also very serious. They both knew that there were only two outcomes after entering the blood-colored tower: get out or die. This might be their last meeting. However, neither of them showed any other emotions. Take care. Break through to the spirit transformation realm as soon as possible. After that, the two of them left. Ling Shiqi turned around with a hesitant expression. In the end, he circulated his spiritual energy and released the spiritual pressure of the spirit transformation realm. Delta Origi's eyes lit up when she felt this spiritual pressure. At that moment, she suddenly heard the sound of something breaking through the air behind her. She leaned slightly to the side and reached out with two fingers. It was an emerald jade hairpin. Ling Shiqi returned to the Yushu clan and went straight to his tent to consolidate his cultivation. 2 days later, he had completely consolidated his cultivation. At the same time, a notification appeared before him. System upgrade complete. Ling Shiqi immediately called out the system and looked at his information. Name, Ling Shiqi, Lu Xingji, Cultivation, Spirit Transformation Realm Level 1 Cultivation Method, Rank 3 Cultivation Method, Moonlight Cloud Manual Rank 3 Cultivation Method, Beast Origin Demonic Technique Bloodline. Spiritual Skills, Rank 2 Spiritual Skill, Heavy Cross Spear Mastery Rank 2 Spiritual Skill, Formation Breaking Spear Mastery Rank 2 Spiritual Skill, 6 Yang Palms Mastery Level 2 Spiritual Technique Wind Catching Kick Level 2 Spiritual Skill Mountain Destroying Finger Perfection Level 2 Spiritual Skill Mysterious Cloud Spike Rank 3 Spiritual Skill Channel Breaking Sword Aura System Coins 521. There were no changes to his information. He then looked at the system interface and saw that there was an additional word, map. Ling Shiqi immediately opened the map, and a circular map appeared in front of him. However, 99% of the map was black. There was only a small white dot at the bottom right corner. Ling Shiqi guessed, "Is this a fog map?" Then, he opened the map and sank into the ground. As he continued to move, more and more white areas appeared on the map. He could clearly see some of the terrain in the white areas, but that was it. With this map, I don't have to worry about things like fog formations, but it doesn't seem to be very useful. Maybe there are other functions. I'll slowly explore it in the future, Ling Shiqi thought as he returned to the tent. Then, he opened the lottery interface that he had the most hope for. When he clicked on it, he saw that there were 3 lottery options. He was delighted. The 3 options were beginner lottery, intermediate lottery, and unlimited lottery. At this moment, all 3 options were lit up. Ling Shiqi clicked on the question mark next to the intermediate lottery. He found out that it cost 100 system coins to enter the intermediate lottery. He had always thought that he had saved up a lot of system coins, but now it seemed that he only had enough for 5 draws. This made Ling Shiqi feel very helpless, so he muttered to himself, "The beginner lottery only costs 10 system coins, but the intermediate lottery costs 10 times more. Is the intermediate lottery really that valuable?" Chapter 114. Ling Shiqi was surprised at the amount of system coins required for the intermediate lottery. However, after thinking about it, his Hand of the Earth was an intermediate prize. The Hand of the Earth had now been developed to a very high level. It could be said to be a combination of restriction, escape, defense, and attack. Moreover, it did not require any hand seals. It was simply amazing. Thinking of this, Ling Shiqi felt relieved. As the saying goes, you get what you pay for. The value of the intermediate prize was definitely not something that the beginner prize could compare to. Then, Ling Shiqi clicked on the intermediate lottery option and chose 5 consecutive draws. After a burst of rainbow-colored light. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the intermediate prize, voice-changing technique. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the intermediate prize, fairy talisman. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the intermediate prize, soul essence. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the intermediate prize, righteous thunder orb. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the intermediate prize, frost sword aura. Voice-changing technique. Looking at the 5 prizes, Ling Shiqi felt that the most interesting one was the voice-changing technique. After picking it up, he found that it was a level 2 spiritual skill. Ling Shiqi did not hesitate and directly used his unlimited skill points to cultivate the voice-changing technique to the maximum level. Then, Ling Shiqi coughed lightly and his voice became rough. Ling Shiqi adjusted it again. His voice was sometimes hoarse, sometimes deep, and sometimes sharp. He could even imitate the voices of children and women. Not only that, he could even imitate the voices of small animals. The intermediate prize is indeed extraordinary. Ling Shiqi said with a hint of joy. The voice-changing technique seemed useless, but if used ingeniously, it could produce unexpected results. Then, Ling Shiqi picked up the fairy talisman. It was a square gem with a dark blue orb inlaid in the middle. It was tied with a simple string. A line of information appeared beside it. After wearing it, it can speed up the recovery of spiritual power. Ling Shiqi was delighted when he saw this line of words. Oh. Not bad. One had to know that as one's cultivation increased, the time it took to recover spiritual power would become longer. If they were in a dangerous environment, the sooner they recovered their spiritual energy, the more confident they would be. Ling Shiqi directly put the fairy amulet on his neck, and sure enough, he felt the spiritual power in his body become more agile. He chuckled and reached out to touch the wisp of light green flame-like thing floating in the air. It was a wisp of soul essence. Ling Shiqi didn't know who or what this soul essence belonged to, but he knew from the item's information that as long as he absorbed this soul essence, his mental power would increase greatly. With a curl of his finger, the soul essence flew toward him and entered between his eyebrows. In the blink of an eye, Ling Shiqi felt refreshed, and then there was a buzzing sound in his head, as if something had been opened. His vision suddenly went black, and when he could see again, he found himself in a narrow and dark space. To his surprise, he had turned into a small ball of green light. He controlled himself to shake around, but didn't find anything special. However, not long after, his vision went black again. Ling Shiqi opened his eyes, but immediately felt a sharp pain in his head, causing him to groan in pain. Did I overuse my mental power? This was because he had extracted the blood of many demonic beasts, and this process also consumed a lot of mental energy. He remembered that when he extracted the blood of the silver-scaled fire-armored crocodile and several rank 1 monsters, a similar situation occurred. It seems that the dark space should also be related to mental power. In short, it's a good thing. Ling Shiqi murmured. Next, he picked up the purple-blue bead. This bead was half the size of a fist, and there were a few lightning runes engraved on it. When he picked up the bead, he saw the information about it, and then Ling Shiqi hurriedly stored it in the system space. The information said, Righteous Lightning Bead, a one-time consumable, its power is equivalent to the full power attack of a spirit cultivator in the middle stage of the spirit transformation realm. It has additional damage to evil things. It was equivalent to the full power attack of a spirit cultivator in the middle stage of the spirit transformation realm. Ling Shiqi dared to say that if he threw out this bead, no one in the current Blood Mist Island would be able to block it. With this, he was more confident about the battle that would take place a month later. Finally, he picked up the small booklet. This was the rank 3 spiritual skill, Frost Sword Chi. He still used unlimited skill points to cultivate it to perfection in a short period of time, and then his eyes revealed a pondering expression. This Frost Sword Chi was similar to the unblocking Meridian Sword Chi that he had cultivated before. However, the unblocking Meridian Sword Chi's specialty was to seal the meridians and block the circulation of spirit energy, while the Frost Sword Chi had a dense cold air and had the effect of freezing. The two were comparable. However, Ling Shiqi had already integrated the channel unfolding sword aura into the mesmerizing eyes of flowers technique. Thus, he planned to do his best to integrate the frigid frost sword aura into it in the next month. With the previous example, it would be relatively easier. This way, he could target different opponents and choose between the Chaotic Blossom Dazzling Eyes with the unblocking Meridian Sword Chi or the Frost Sword Chi. As a result, this move became even more flexible. After counting all the prizes, Ling Shiqi was very satisfied because every item was very useful and made him feel that it was very worth it. He was still thinking about whether or not to secretly fill his pockets and get something from the sect to draw a few more times. After ending the intermediate lottery, Ling Shiqi called out the system interface again and his gaze fell on the lit-up, unlimited lottery. This unlimited lottery really gave him unlimited possibilities. The first time, he had drawn unlimited skill points. Ling Shiqi was very clear that if it wasn't for this godly prize, he might not have reached where he was today. The second time, he had drawn the Hand of the Earth, a special spiritual skill with endless uses. If it wasn't for the Hand of the Earth, he wouldn't have accidentally entered the underground space, and it would be even more impossible for him to obtain the demonic beast technique and have his current cultivation and combat strength. The most important thing was that he wouldn't have known that the second Heaven's Bane was coming, otherwise he might have died in the Heaven's Bane. It could be said that they were all linked, so from a certain point of view, the Hand of the Earth was no less helpful to Ling Shiqi than the unlimited skill points. Now that Ling Shiqi had another unlimited lottery chance, he was naturally looking forward to it. Phew! Ling Shiqi exhaled heavily, raised his finger, and clicked on the unlimited lottery option. He stared at the dazzling light in the system without blinking. After a few breaths of time, the light dissipated, and he didn't see anything. Just when he thought he had seen wrongly, a line of words appeared in front of him. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the advanced prize, Supercilious Eyes. Chapter 115. A month passed in the blink of an eye. The strange thing was that no danger had appeared on Blood Mist Island during this month. Everyone on Blood Mist Island had been cultivating peacefully for a month. The only thing they did during this month was cultivate, and cultivate. What they needed to do was to wantonly consume resources and strive to become stronger. Yushu, with the support of a large amount of resources, finally crossed the bottleneck 2 days ago and entered the spirit transformation realm. But today, the Yushu clan was a little special. At this moment, everyone in the Yushu clan was celebrating. They took out all the food and water to share. They talked to each other, and some people even did strange and ugly dances. Everyone's faces were filled with happy smiles. Yushu was surrounded by the crowd, wantonly throwing a tantrum. He was jumping around excitedly, completely like a child. Of course, with their age, they were still children. Ling Shiqi sent out Ziyu to patrol everyone in the sky. Then, he sneaked into a tent when no one was paying attention. Usually, this tent stored a large amount of the Yushu clan's weapons, but they were going to enter the Blood Tower tomorrow, so all the spiritual weapons were distributed. At this moment, there were only a dozen or so unranked weapons left in the tent. Ling Shiqi's target just happened to be these weapons that no one wanted. A dozen or so unranked weapons and my remaining system coins should be enough for 2 intermediate lottery draws, Ling Shiqi muttered to himself as he walked into the tent. During this month, Blood Fog Island seemed to have completely fallen into silence. Not only did they not cause any trouble, but even the demon beasts had disappeared. This gave Ling Shiqi, who wanted to obtain system coins, a headache, so he could only set his sights on his own home. Ling Shiqi casually picked up a scimitar and naturally waited for the system prompt. However, the strange thing was that after a few breaths of time, the system prompt did not appear. Ling Shiqi blinked in confusion and flipped through the weapon in his hand, but there was still no system prompt. Then Ling Shiqi picked up several other weapons, but the result was the same. He couldn't help but frown as he muttered, "What's going on? Did the system malfunction?" He then pulled out the dagger hidden at his ankle, and a system message immediately appeared before his eyes. Worth 29 system coins. Do you wish to sell? No. Of course, Ling Shiqi couldn't sell this level 2 spiritual tool, but at least the system notification appeared. After pondering for a moment, he seemed to have thought of something. He immediately walked out of the tent and borrowed a level 1 spirit tool from someone. It's worth 17 system coins. Will you sell it? No. Ling Shiqi returned the weapon. He had an answer in his heart, but it was an answer he did not want to accept. That was, after the upgrade, the system no longer needed those low-grade resources. Ling Shiqi didn't know if the system's standards were too high, or if it was too arrogant, but the system's change suddenly disrupted his plan. Just as he was having a headache, Yushu suddenly appeared and pulled Ling Shiqi away, shouting as he walked, "Come, I'll pull the dark crow over." Immediately, a group of people rushed over and surrounded them in the middle. They danced and shouted, "Brother Yi, oh, 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 oh." Roar, 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 roar. Endless enthusiasm instantly drowned Ling Shiqi, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, he could only put aside all the doubts and guesses in his heart and celebrate with everyone. This was the first time since he came to this world that he had let down all his guard and vigilance. Perhaps this would also be the last time. Under the blood-red sky, a group of young men who came from nowhere and whose names were unknown were dancing with all their might. After a long time, the tired people went to rest. Today, no one was arranged to keep watch, but Yushu and Ling Shiqi personally kept watch. At this time, Yushu was leaning against a wooden chair, gnawing on a fruit with difficulty, burping from time to time. Ling Shiqi directly sat on the ground, leaning against a wooden pillar. The blood-red sky outside was not far from their camp. In about a day or so, it would devour the camp. In other words, tomorrow, they must enter the blood-red tower. Whether they live or die, it will be decided tomorrow. To be honest, even Ling Shiqi was not confident in his own heart. After all, no one knew what kind of danger they would encounter. As for whether they could survive in the end, he did not know. The fear of the unknown had always been in everyone's heart, so tonight was their first and last time to celebrate. He, don't you think it's strange? At this time, Yushu's voice came, pulling him back from his thoughts. Ling Shiqi glanced at him and asked cooperatively, "What's strange?" Yushu continued, "We're about to enter the blood-red tower, but I don't feel nervous at all. In fact, I feel a little excited when I think about it. I heard that if a person is extremely hungry, they won't feel hungry anymore." Are you saying that I'm afraid?" Yushu said unhappily. "It's normal to be afraid. Who on Blood Fog Island is not afraid at this time? What about you?" Ling Shiqi laughed self-deprecatingly and said, "Of course I'm afraid. I'm afraid of dying here." "Oh, okay. I admit that I'm afraid too. I thought you would hold on a little longer." Ha, you've admitted it. What's there to be afraid of? But Brother Ling, don't you think I'm really funny?" Yushu's voice suddenly became serious. Ling Shiqi glanced at him and asked, "How are you funny?" Yushu pondered for a moment and said, "In the past, when I formed the Yushu clan, I didn't have any feelings for the people under me. I only saw them as tools. Of course, they might have seen me like that too. But we've gone through so many hardships together, so many storms to get to where we are today. How can I be heartless to them?" At this point, his eyes were a little red and he continued, but when I have feelings for them, I still have to continue using them as tools. Especially tomorrow. I can't bear it, but I have to do it because I want to live. I don't think I'm wrong, but I feel guilty in my heart. I'm in pain. I don't know what to do. Don't you think I'm funny?" Ling Shiqi listened to him quietly. He thought that Yushu actually had such a side to him. He thought for a moment and asked, "Do you know what a cold-blooded animal is?" Seeing Ling Shiqi suddenly ask such a question, Yushu was a little confused, but he still replied, "Snake." "Yes, but you might not know. There's an animal whose blood is 10 times, 100 times colder than a snake." "What animal?" Ling Shiqi said a word softly, "People." Yushu frowned. "People are the most cold-blooded animals in the world, including you and me. So you don't feel pain at all? Do you think you have feelings for them?" "You're wrong. That's just what you think." Ling Shiqi looked at Yushu with a look of disbelief and continued, "If you don't believe me, I'll only ask you one question. Do you remember who Chishui is?" "Chishui?" Yushu opened his mouth. He clearly knew this person, but when he thought of him, he couldn't remember who he was. Friend? Enemy? Oh, so he's my subordinate. He's the one who helped me build the foundation of the Yushu clan. He's dead. He seems to have died in the Battle of Puppets. What does he look like again? Thinking of this, Yushu suddenly felt a chill down his spine. He couldn't help but shiver. It seemed that even his blood was frozen. After a while, Yushu laughed softly, but gradually, his laughter became louder and louder. He even laughed until tears flowed out of his eyes. Yushu raised his hand and wiped the tears from his eyes. The corners of his eyes were red. "You're right. I'm a cold-blooded animal. I'm asking for trouble." Ling Shiqi didn't answer. Instead, he looked at the blood-red light in the sky. After an unknown amount of time, the blood-red light became fainter. He knew that it was almost dawn. Yushu stood up and stretched. He seemed to have returned to normal. He looked at the sky and then looked at Ling Shiqi. He said, "Aren't you going to see her?" Ling Shiqi also stood up. He brushed the dust off his body and said, "No need. We'll meet again if we have the chance." After saying that, he turned around and walked into his tent. Before he entered the tent, he tossed out something. Yushu stretched out his hand to catch it. Taking a closer look, he saw that it was a white pill. It was the antidote for the heart-destroying pill. Chapter 116. The next day. A total of 46 people from the Yushu clan stood in front of the blood-colored tower. They were all expressionless and didn't have any food or water on them. Behind them, the camp was long gone. Only this blood-colored tower remained on the entire Blood Fog Island. Whether they lived or died would be decided today. Yushu, who had always stood at the front, was now standing in the middle of everyone. Ling Shiqi, who was wearing a mask, was standing beside him. However, at this moment, Ling Shiqi was also wearing a large white cloak with a large hood covering half of his face. He was carrying a sword on his back. Everyone looked at the dark door not far away. It was like a giant mouth from the underworld that wanted to devour everyone. "Let's go." There were no heroic words, no passion, and no inspiring words. Just like that, Yushu said these two words lightly. In an instant, everyone's breathing became heavy. Everyone pulled out their weapons and stepped into the blood-colored tower. At the same time, the people from the other three forces also entered. Not long after they entered, the blood-colored sky completely swallowed up the entire place, leaving only this tower. When Ling Shiqi and the others entered the tower, they could only see one thing, and that was fog. What a thick fog! It was several times thicker than the fog outside. They could not see more than 10 feet away. Everyone channeled their spirit force into their eyes to see better, but they could only see about 2 feet away. Only Ling Shiqi and Yushu, who were at the spirit transformation realm, could see about 4 to 5 feet away. At this time, there was no need for Yushu to remind them. Everyone raised their vigilance and carefully walked inside. Crack! However, all of a sudden, someone stepped on something and made a sound. Ling Shiqi knew that something was wrong. He opened up his perception and clenched the sword in his hand. Sure enough, there was a series of caw-caw sounds coming from all around. It was like the sound of a mechanism being activated. Soon after, there was a dense sound of something breaking through the air. However, because the fog was too thick, it was impossible to tell what it was or where it came from. Who? Ling Shiqi felt that he couldn't be too passive. He immediately struck out with his palm, causing a huge gust of wind to blow away the surrounding fog. After blowing away the fog, he saw that dozens of pitch-black nails had already shot towards his head. The Ling Shiqi's swords danced in the air, blocking all the black nails with clanking sounds. However, Ling Shiqi and Yushu were standing in the crowd, so they received the least amount of black nails, but the others were different. This was especially true for the group of people at the outermost perimeter. Hundreds of black spikes rained down like raindrops. Even though these people were all in the pure spirit realm, in the face of so many black nails, it was still difficult for them to resist for a while, and screams immediately rose and fell. After a round of black nails, it finally quieted down. Yushu immediately said, "Count the casualties." Sect Master, 5 brothers died, and 8 were injured. Hua Lingling quickly asked and replied. They hadn't done anything yet, but so many people had died. Yushu's face suddenly became a little ugly. Ling Shiqi said at this time, "Don't worry, there shouldn't be many of these traps. Otherwise, it would be meaningless for us to all die under the traps." Yushu nodded thoughtfully after hearing this, but at this moment, a ghostly figure suddenly flashed through the fog. Then there was a scream. A person suddenly fell to the ground. Everyone hurriedly looked over, and then there was the sound of people sucking in cold air one after another. It turned out that there was a huge hole in the person's chest, and the heart inside had disappeared. Who is it? What is it? If the people who died under the black nails just now were not strong enough, then this time it was not a matter of strength. They didn't even see the opponent and died in an instant. This kind of danger and fear were much greater than the traps. Some people were already a little panicked. Don't panic, back to back. Yushu shouted, and everyone immediately followed. Ding! Ah! But in the blink of an eye, another person suddenly died, and even the weapon in his hand was broken in half. Everyone's heart sank even more, and an atmosphere of panic emerged. Knowing that this could not go on, Ling Shichi's eyes under the hood suddenly changed. The veins around his eyes bulged, and his pupils turned green and white. Byakugan, activate. Byakugan was a high-level ocular skill from the anime world. It had a 360-degree field of vision with no blind spots, and super insight that could see through things. It could also see the amount and flow of energy in the body. It was a powerful ocular skill that combined detection, anti-detection, and the ability to see through weaknesses. After activating Byakugan, Ling Shichi's field of vision suddenly expanded to a full range of vision. The world in his eyes turned black and white, and there were dozens of red and blue balls of light around him. Those were the spiritual energy and meridians of the Yushu clan. However, Ling Shichi's attention was not on these people, because he immediately caught sight of a spiritual energy that was not very large, but abnormally terrifying. The owner of that spiritual energy was extremely fast, and constantly swam around, as if looking for a suitable prey. Ling Shichi quietly nudged Yushu, indicating that he should follow him. Yushu nodded in understanding. Then, Ling Shichi suddenly stomped his foot, and then a mud wall more than a foot thick appeared in a strange place. Everyone was baffled when they saw this. However, in the blink of an eye, the mud wall suddenly shattered. A short figure appeared there. When Ling Shichi erected the mud wall, he had already rushed over on the black fog, and at this moment, he unceremoniously swung his sword. This saber light was even sharper than before, and it had reached a length of nearly 3 meters. In addition, another sword that was not weaker than his followed closely behind, and the two sword lights whistled as they slashed towards the figure. Unfortunately, the figure was extremely agile, and Ling Shichi's sword light only grazed the side of the figure, while Yushu directly slashed empty air. However, Ling Shichi had already used Byakugan's observation ability to predict this step in advance. His left palm lit up with a faint brilliance, and then he quickly formed a few spiritual seals with one hand, and fiercely pushed them forward. Then, a majestic cold energy surged out from his palm, and rushed towards the figure. Wherever the cold energy went, a layer of ice crystals instantly formed on the ground. This was one of the results of Ling Shichi's fusion of spiritual techniques. He fused Spirit Strike and Ice Spread into two spiritual techniques, Spirit Strike, Path of Ice. The key point was that the direction of Ling Shichi's attack wasn't directly aimed at the figure, but slightly slanted. However, the strange thing was that when the figure moved, it actually ran into the cold energy. It was as if it purposely ran into it. Ling Shichi had used Byakugan to predict the direction that the figure was going to move in. The huge cold energy directly swallowed the figure, and in the blink of an eye, it condensed into a thick layer of ice crystals and froze it. Only then did everyone see that the figure was actually a small monkey half the height of a person, but this monkey's aura was that of a rank 2 monster. Chapter 117. When everyone saw what had attacked them, the fear in their hearts lessened. Although this demon monkey was a rank 2 demonic beast, the Yushu clan had dealt with rank 2 demonic beasts in the past few months, so they had some confidence. What are you waiting for? Get ready to attack. Yushu shouted. Everyone quickly moved in an orderly manner, surrounding the demon monkey. Every one of their weapons shone with rays of spiritual light, and their spiritual techniques were ready to be unleashed. Gotcha! A crack appeared on the ice crystal that froze the demon monkey. Then, the crack spread out like a spider web. Attack! Under Yushu's command, dozens of different attacks landed on the demon monkey one after another. Ling Shiqi was not in a hurry to attack. He was waiting for an opportunity. Bang! The ice finally shattered, and the demon monkey broke free. However, just as it was about to break free, dozens of attacks also arrived at its side. The demon monkey seemed to have some intelligence, and it quickly dodged. However, even though it was fast and dodged many attacks, dozens of people's weapons still hit the demon monkey. Although this demon monkey was a rank 2 demonic beast, it was different from the silver-scaled fire-armored crocodile. It was very fast, but its defense was average. Dozens of people left many wounds on its body. GGA. The demon monkey bared its teeth and roared a few times. Its body emitted a tyrannical aura. Its two small eyes looked left and right, and then it pounced on a person nearby. The demon monkey was too fast. That person did not even have time to react before he felt a chill in his chest. He looked down and saw that his chest was empty. That person fell limply to the ground. However, it also created an opportunity for others. In the blink of an eye, more wounds appeared on its body. However, the demon monkey did not care about its injuries. It jumped left and right in the crowd, and every time it jumped, it would dig out a person's heart. Not long after, 5 people had already died in its hands. Ling Shiqi continued to observe silently. He did not attack because he knew that his speed was not as fast as the demon monkey. If he joined the battle, he would still be led by the nose. He had to find an opportunity to heavily injure the demon monkey. Just as the 7th person fell, Ling Shiqi suddenly moved. The wounded monkey demon finally slowed down a little. It stopped for a moment when it took out a heart and landed on the ground. At this moment, Ling Shiqi used Ghost Parade and Confusion Footwork at the same time, turning into an afterimage as he rushed over. At the same time, his spirit saber slashed out, and a gorgeous crescent-shaped saber light swept out. Half-moon light slash. Now that he had broken through to the spirit transformation realm, the power of all his spiritual techniques had reached a new level. The glaring blade light enveloped the entire demon monkey. However, just as the blade light was about to land, the demon monkey's body suddenly erupted with boundless blood-red light. The bloody light was extremely viscous, greatly hindering the saber light. At this moment, the hair on the demon monkey's body stood on end, and its color gradually turned blood-red. What was even more terrifying was that its body was constantly expanding. In the blink of an eye, the demon monkey that was only half the height of a human grew into a giant monkey that was 2 feet tall. Ling Shiqi's half-moon light slash tore through the bloody light and slashed at the demon monkey's waist. However, the saber light only cut a few inches into the demon monkey's abdomen. The demon monkey was in extreme pain. It roared and slammed its arms down. Boom! The unknown floor of the underground exploded with a loud bang, and the broken pieces shot out, injuring many people. However, Ling Shiqi, who was originally standing there, had long disappeared and appeared behind the demon monkey. Seeing the demon monkey's change, Ling Shiqi was not surprised, but happy. The demon monkey seemed to be much stronger, and its strength was incomparable, but it had also lost its speed, which was the most troublesome thing to him. It was also at this moment that a sound was heard. A golden rope suddenly flew over and tightly wrapped around the demon monkey. Ling Shiqi glanced over and saw that it was Yushu who threw the rope. He immediately slashed out again. The others were not stupid, and they knew that this was an excellent opportunity, so they all made their moves. Puff, 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 many more wounds appeared on the demon monkey's body, and blood seeped out from its body. The demon monkey kept twisting its body, trying to break free from the rope. Fortunately, the rope was a rank 2 spirit treasure, and Yushu was also at the spirit transformation realm. Although he was far weaker than the demon monkey, he could still hold on for a short period of time. The demon monkey that was bound by the rope could only wait to be slaughtered, especially by Ling Shiqi. Every time Ling Shiqi attacked, he would cause obvious wounds to the demon monkey. Furthermore, Ling Shiqi would secretly shoot out a few strands of imbuing meridian sword chi to further weaken the demon monkey. Roar, roar. The demon monkey suddenly let out a roar. It raised its arms and broke the rope. Everyone thought that the rope could hold on for a while, but they were all shocked. The demon monkey's arms swung out violently, instantly sending a few people flying. Those people were trapped in the dense fog, and it was unknown if they were still alive. However, Ling Shiqi and Yushu were both happy because they could feel that the demon monkey's aura was rapidly weakening. It wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Yushu rushed over with his blade in both hands and slashed out 2 blade lights. When the blade lights got close, they turned into dozens of blade lights that landed on the demon monkey's body. Ling Shiqi gently jumped and used the half-moon light slash again, ruthlessly chopping at the demon monkey's head. The rest of the people didn't hesitate and used their strongest spirit skills to attack. After a few breaths of time, the demon monkey's huge body fell to the ground. Phew! Everyone let out a sigh of relief. Ling Shiqi took out a dagger and stabbed it into the demon monkey's head. Then, he took out a fingernail-sized demon core and put it away. The others didn't react at all. They knew that the ones who contributed the most in the battle were Yushu and his vice leader. Yushu didn't say anything, so they wouldn't say anything. Moreover, they didn't have the demon core. After the demon monkey died, the fog in the area quickly dissipated. Not long after, everyone saw a pitch-black passageway not too far away. That should be the entrance to the next level, Ling Shiqi said. Yushu nodded and said to everyone, there shouldn't be any danger now, but we can't let our guard down. Those who are injured, heal first. The rest of you, take turns to recover your spirit power. Yes. Everyone answered. Yushu looked around, and the more he looked, the worse his expression became. Because he saw 17 corpses on the ground. That meant that there were only 29 of them left. It had only been 30 minutes since they entered and so many people had died. This was only the first level. What kind of danger would there be? Yushu looked at the dark tunnel with a gloomy expression and felt a little uneasy. Chapter 118. On the first floor of the blood-colored tower, the Yushu clan members were still taking turns to recover their spiritual power. But at this moment, a sudden change occurred. A few huge cracks suddenly appeared on the ground, and under the cracks, they could vaguely see the endless void. Everyone was startled. Ling Shiqi was the same, because a crack had appeared beside him. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and hurriedly dodged it. Yushu hurriedly said, "Not good, let's go." Everyone no longer cared about recovering their spiritual power and hurriedly ran into the dark passage. When the last person ran in, the ground outside had already shattered. Below them was the void that could swallow everything. Yushu turned around and saw that no one had fallen into the void, so he heaved a sigh of relief. Rumble. Then, before everyone could react, they felt their bodies shake, and the ground under their feet began to gradually rise. Ling Shiqi understood that this should be the way to the second floor. After a few seconds, the ground under their feet returned to normal, and a spacious circular space appeared in front of them. There was no fog in this space, and the place was about 200 to 300 feet in radius. Upon closer inspection, there were all kinds of strange patterns engraved on the walls. Ling Shiqi was familiar with these patterns, as he had seen many of them in the underground space, and the patterns on the walls were arrays. He immediately reminded everyone, "Be careful, there are arrays here." However, just as he finished speaking, all the arrays on the walls lit up. Immediately, everyone felt a huge suction force pulling them directly to the center of the second floor. After everyone had steadied themselves, wooden puppets walked out of the array formation one after another. These puppets were all humanoid and looked extremely exquisite, much better than the ones they saw in the wetlands. There were exactly 30 puppets. Moreover, these puppets were all different. The one at the front held a shield and an axe, the one at the back held a halberd, and the last one held a bow and arrow. This was like a small combat army. The 30 puppets surrounded everyone in 3 layers. Their originally empty eyes lit up with different colors of light. There weren't many people in the Yushu clan who had fought against humanoid puppets before. Back then, most of them were still in the spirit-gathering realm and were dealing with the lion-shaped puppets and the demonic beasts that came later. But even then, they knew that the greatest threat amongst the puppets was the archer puppets. He had to deal with the archer puppet first. However, before they could do anything, the puppets had already pressed down on them. In particular, the 10 archer puppets at the back all pulled out the bows on their backs and fired in unison. 10 sharp arrows flew over. Ling Shiqi and Yushu each blocked 2 arrows. The others were already prepared. Those who could dodge, and those who could block, blocked. After a round of arrows, only 2 of them were slightly injured. Surprisingly, none of them died. However, they weren't happy because the shield axe puppets and halberd-wielding puppets had already surrounded them. The clan members hurriedly went up to fight fiercely. However, this also meant that they couldn't be distracted and constantly guard against the arrows. Thump. Blood is no different stabbed the shield of the shield axe puppet, but it only made a small hole. One had to know that blood is no different was already in the late stage of the pure spirit realm and wielded a second stage spiritual weapon. Even so, he was unable to cause any substantial damage to the shield axe puppet. This showed how tough these puppets were. At this time, Ling Shiqi quickly picked up a few arrows nearby. He raised his hand and shot the arrows at the archer puppet at the back. The arrows divided into 2 groups in mid-air and shot at the 2 archer puppets. With a few "kacha" sounds, the arrows accurately hit the archer puppets' eyes. Their heads immediately tilted and they stopped moving. However, at this moment, the remaining 8 archer puppets shot another round of arrows. This time, everyone was too tired to deal with the puppets and had no room to dodge. In an instant, 4 people were killed by the arrows. Fortunately, Ling Shiqi and the Yushu clan blocked a few arrows. Otherwise, even more people would have died. Ling Shiqi and Yushu looked at each other and knew that they couldn't continue like this. They nodded in tacit understanding and the 2 of them charged at the same shield axe puppet at the same time. Yushu gathered all his spirit force at the tip of his sword. His spirit transformation realm spirit force circulated at full force and instantly pierced through the shield of the shield axe puppet. Then, he suddenly slashed downwards. With a "ka" sound, the shield was directly broken into 2. Ling Shiqi followed closely behind. He no longer hid and a long spear appeared in his hand. He let out a roar and a hint of domineering aura appeared from his body. His body moved and the spear shot out like a dragon. An astonishing spiritual light erupted from the tip of the spear, and as it pierced forward, it suddenly transformed into a huge cross-shaped brilliance. This was the formation-breaking cross spear that Ling Shiqi had created by fusing the heavy cross spear and the formation-breaking cross spear. The formation-breaking cross spear carried a boundless aura as it rushed into the midst of the puppets, directly piercing towards the puppet whose shield had been split open by Yushu. With a loud ping, the shield axe puppet exploded with a loud bang. The formation-breaking cross spear didn't slow down and continued to smash into the halberd-wielding puppet behind it. The halberd-wielding puppet's defense was far inferior to the shield-axe puppet, so a large hole was created by the spear. Yushu followed up with another strike to completely destroy it. The two of them worked together to tear a hole in the puppet. At this moment, the puppets on the side also closed in, but they were all stopped by Hua Lingling and the others. Ling Shiqi didn't dare to delay any longer and quickly rushed toward the archer puppet. Yushu went in another direction. The 8 archer puppets pulled back their bowstrings once, and Ling Shiqi flashed to the side of the puppet. With a gale slash, he chopped it into pieces. At the same time, he flicked his arm and threw the spear, destroying another puppet. On the other side, Yushu quickly dealt with an archer puppet. However, 5 arrows were still shot out. Now that there was no Ling Shiqi or the Yushu clan to block the arrows, 3 more people were killed in the blink of an eye. Although the other 2 arrows didn't hit their vitals, the 2 people were surrounded by many puppets and wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Ling Shiqi didn't dare to delay and used his fastest speed to kill 3 archer puppets before the next arrow was shot. The rest were all killed by Yushu. At this moment, all 10 archer puppets were finally destroyed. With these archer puppets dead, the biggest threat was gone and the rest was much easier. Although the shield-axe puppets and halberd-wielding puppets were troublesome, they were only troublesome and not dangerous. Then Ling Shiqi and Yushu joined the battle and the battle gradually tilted in favor of the Yushu clan. In the end, after losing 2 more people, they finally destroyed all the puppets. Is it over? Yushu asked while panting. Don't let your guard down. Let's wait and see. Ling Shiqi looked around vigilantly and said. At this moment, Mu-21 suddenly shouted, "There, look over there." When everyone heard this, they turned their heads and saw that a dark tunnel had appeared on the wall not far away. Seeing this, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. However, at this moment, many cracks appeared on the ground without warning. They didn't even have time to breathe. Everyone immediately ran towards the tunnel with all their might. Unfortunately, due to this sudden appearance of the crack, there were still 4 people who accidentally fell into the crack. Not even their bones were left behind. Chapter 119. The people who ran into the dark tunnel were all panting with lingering fear. After defeating the puppets this time, they thought that they would have some time to recover, but they didn't expect the ground to split open so quickly, catching everyone off guard. Ling Shiqi looked around and found that there were only 16 people left. Moreover, except for him and Yushu, everyone else was injured. In terms of danger, the second floor was not much more dangerous than the first floor, but the last crack in the ground was impossible to guard against. Feeling the ground under his feet begin to rise again, Ling Shiqi knew that they were going to the 3rd floor. He took advantage of this gap to swallow 2 pills to recover his spiritual energy. After entering the 3rd floor, the environment was similar to the 2nd floor. The only difference was that not only were there arrays engraved on the walls, but even the entire ground was engraved with arrays. Seeing this scene, everyone including Ling Shiqi's heart sank. This floor was probably even more terrifying than the 2nd floor. With heavy hearts, these people walked step by step into the 3rd floor. However, when they reached the center, they didn't see anything happening, nor was there any danger. Ling Shiqi frowned and looked around. He turned his head to say something to Yushu, but when he turned his head, he was stunned. There was no one behind him. The entire 3rd floor was empty, and he was the only one left. Ling Shiqi was shocked, but he immediately calmed down. He knew that the people around him could not disappear in an instant. Thinking about the arrays he saw before, he guessed that it was very likely an illusion. Ling Shiqi closed his eyes and a faint wave of spiritual energy spread out from between his eyebrows. The surrounding environment also changed slightly. The most obvious thing was that the patterns engraved on the walls and ground had disappeared. This meant that he was already in the middle of an array. Ling Shiqi. At this moment, a clear voice came from behind. Ling Shiqi quickly turned around and raised his eyebrows. His expression was a little unnatural as he said, Delta Origi. That's right, the person who appeared behind him was a Delta Origi, but Ling Shiqi could tell that this Delta Origi was fake at a glance. Although this Delta Origi was very similar to the real Delta Origi in terms of figure, appearance, and temperament, it was not an exaggeration to say that it was exactly the same. However, for some reason, this Delta Origi did not look like a real person. This was just like a wax figure or a painting. No matter how lifelike it was or how similar the painting was, a fake was still a fake and could be seen at a glance. Ling Shiqi thought to himself, maybe it's because my spiritual power isn't weak, so I have some resistance to illusions. However, he immediately put on an anxious expression and said, Delta Origi, why are you here? Are you okay? Delta Origi smiled shyly and said, I'm fine. I'm just a little injured. Where are you injured? Let me see. Ling Shiqi's face showed a concerned expression as he quickly walked over. Just as Ling Shiqi was about to touch Delta Origi suddenly raised its hand. Its soft sword suddenly stabbed out dozens of silver snake-like sword shadows. However, Ling Shiqi was even faster. Before Delta Origi stabbed out, his figure changed into 9 phantoms. Each phantom stabbed out with a sword, and at the same time, it was mixed with invisible sword chi. In an instant, the sword light shot out in all directions, and the sword chi was everywhere. Whoosh! Ling Shiqi's figure had already appeared behind Delta Origi. Following that, 9 sword rays wrapped in sword chi mercilessly fell. Delta Origi's sword shadows also shattered a few of the sword rays, but more still stabbed into her body. Delta Origi was immediately covered in blood, and half knelt on the ground. Why are you treating me like this? Delta Origi asked sorrowfully. Ling Shiqi was unmoved. He coldly said, a fake is a fake. Ha! Delta Origi laughed sadly and said, a fake. Seeing this scene, Ling Shiqi's heart suddenly thumped. He had an ominous feeling. Gu San stood up, and the strange thing was that the injuries on her body had all healed. She continued, that's right, I am indeed a fake. You saw through it a long time ago. This means that either you're very scheming, or your spiritual power is very strong. However, although I'm a fake, my heart is real. Ling Shiqi's expression gradually darkened. Delta Origi continued, I'm the manifestation of the obsession in your heart, including your memories and feelings for her. I can even feel her feelings. Why are you telling me this? Ling Shiqi frowned and asked. He could break this illusion at any time, and Delta Origi's words could not shake his mind. However, the feeling of being seen through was not a good feeling. Delta Origi revealed a strange smile and said, it's easy for you to break the illusion, but if you think this is just a small illusion, then you're wrong. We may meet again in the future. Let me ask you one last question. If I'm real, will you do the same to me? This sentence suddenly shocked Ling Shiqi, but in the next moment, Delta Origi in front of him disappeared on its own. The surrounding scene also scattered like a burned picture scroll. Ling Shiqi finally returned to the real world. He quickly turned his head and saw that everyone else was standing straight in the same place. Their eyes were full of confusion. Obviously, they had all fallen into an illusion. And they were actually still at the place where they had just stepped into this place. It turns out that we've been in an illusion since the moment we entered here. Ling Shiqi murmured with lingering fear. Fortunately, his spiritual power was not weak, so he could break the illusion so easily. Otherwise, thinking of this, Ling Shiqi's heart suddenly tightened. Otherwise, what could he do? Could he really kill the Delta Origi? Thinking of the last sentence of Delta Origi, Ling Shichi's eyes also showed a look of confusion. But Yushu, who was next to him, suddenly shivered, then sat on the ground and panted heavily. Such a big movement pulled Ling Shichi's thoughts back. Seeing that Yushu also broke the illusion so quickly, Ling Shichi was a little surprised. He reached out to help Yushu up. Yushu subconsciously held his hand, but when he looked up and saw that it was Ling Shichi, he immediately let go. He sat on the ground and quickly moved back. His speed was so fast that it made people speechless. Yushu looked around with a pale face. When he realized that he could see the others, he muttered to himself, "Oh my God, I'm finally out." That was terrifying. Seeing Yushu's reaction, Ling Shichi's mind turned. He seemed to have guessed something. He walked step by step towards Yushu, narrowed his eyes and asked, "What did you encounter in the illusion?" Chapter 120. Ling Shichi was wearing a large cloak and a dark force mask. He looked down at Yushu, and a shadow covered him. He asked coldly, "What did you encounter in the illusion?" Yushu wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and laughed dryly, "Hee, nothing, nothing." "Then tell me how you got out of the illusion." Ling Shichi stopped joking and asked seriously. Seeing Ling Shichi like this, Yushu finally let out a sigh of relief. He thought for a bit and said, "Actually, I'm not very sure. At first, I thought you were really going to." Yushu's expression became a bit unnatural, but Ling Shichi signaled him to continue. "Cough, I thought you were really going to kill me, so we fought. Dark Crow bro, you were too strong, I couldn't take it at all. Then you suddenly used the half-moon sword glint. I thought I was going to be killed, but I didn't expect the half-moon sword glint to hit himself. Then I came out." Hearing this, Ling Shichi nodded thoughtfully. If what the Delta Origi said was true, then the Ling Shichi Yushu encountered in the illusion had the memories of Ling Shichi in his mind. However, the half-moon rapid light slash was a move that Ling Shichi had fused 3 spiritual skills together. It was an ultimate move that he had comprehended when he was at his limit. It wasn't something that could be used with just a bit of memory. So it was possible that the Ling Shichi in Yushu's illusion was counterattacked by this move. But Ling Shichi didn't know whether to laugh or cry at how Yushu escaped the illusion. Yushu looked at the others standing there in a daze. He sighed and said, I didn't expect this level to be an illusion. I don't know how many people can wake up." He wanted to help others, but he himself had somehow gotten rid of the illusion. He had no idea how to do so, so he could only helplessly help. Although Ling Shichi's spiritual power wasn't weak, it was his first time coming into contact with something like an illusion. He couldn't think of any good ideas for the time being and felt a little helpless. He could only helplessly say, "They can only rely on themselves." Just as he finished speaking, another 2 people broke free from the illusion and slumped to the ground. He turned his head and saw that it was Mu-21 and blood is no different. At this time, the 2 of them were soaked in cold sweat. Ling Shichi and Yushu hurried forward to help them up and asked. However, they never expected that the person they met in the illusion was actually Ling Shichi as well. And the results were similar to Yushu's. Ling Shichi inexplicably committed suicide in the end. Yushu finally felt better at this time. He thought to himself, so I'm not the only one who was traumatized by Ling Shichi. Ling Shichi really didn't know what to say. He could only recover his spiritual power while thinking of ways to help others get rid of the illusion. At the same time, he waited for others to wake up. Gradually, a few people broke free from the illusion, but the ground began to crack and collapse again. The speed of the collapse wasn't fast, but there wasn't much time left for them. Ling Shichi recovered his spiritual power and opened his eyes. He saw Yushu anxiously looking around and glancing at someone from time to time. That person was Hua Lingling. She was still immersed in the illusion. Seeing that there were more and more cracks on the ground, Yushu became more and more anxious. Ling Shiqi also thought of an immature idea in the process of recovering his spiritual power, so he said to Yushu, I have a method that might be able to try, but I've never done it before, so the hope is not great. If we're not careful, it might even cause Hua Lingling to have a mental breakdown and die. Yushu's face showed some hesitation. Hua Lingling joined him when he first established the Yushu clan. She had been with him for the longest time. And after she broke through to the pure spirit realm, many things in the clan were taken care of by her. It could be said that she had helped Yushu a lot inside and outside. There was both merit and hard work. Yushu really couldn't bear to watch Hua Lingling die here. Even if there was only a glimmer of hope, he wanted to grasp it. In the end, he gritted his teeth and said, let's try it. Ling Shiqi nodded and walked to Hua Lingling. Then he opened his eyes slightly, and an invisible mental power spread out from between his eyebrows and poured into Hua Lingling's forehead. He was planning to use his mental power to directly attack Hua Lingling's spiritual world. When Hua Lingling was trapped in the illusion, such a violent method was indeed likely to cause her to have a mental breakdown, but this was the only way, because there was almost no time. Hua Lingling let out a muffled groan as a painful expression appeared on her face. Beads of sweat appeared on her cheeks. At this time, Blood is no different and the others had already run into the black passage. He hurriedly shouted, hurry up, this place is going to collapse soon. Seeing that Hua Lingling was still unconscious, Ling Shiqi sighed inwardly and turned to enter the black passage. But at this moment, Hua Lingling suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and opened her eyes. However, her eyes were unfocused and lifeless. Yushu was quick to react. He hurriedly hugged Hua Lingling, who was about to fall, and quickly ran into the black passage. When the three of them entered, the space on the third floor completely collapsed. Yushu said gratefully, Brother Dark Crow, thank you. Ling Shiqi's gaze drifted back and forth between Yushu and Hua Lingling, revealing a meaningful look. Yushu's face turned red. He coughed dryly and changed the topic. How many people are left? Mu Shiqing, Blood is no different, and the others opened their mouths but still did not speak. Yushu turned around. He did not need to count. He could tell at a glance that including himself, there were only 9 people left. 9 people. There were only a single digit left. The illusory array on the third floor took away the lives of 7 people without shedding a single drop of blood. What was even more terrifying was that there were still 2 more floors below. Could the 9 of them make it through? Even Ling Shiqi could not help but feel a little nervous. However, he was still confident because so far, at least they had not encountered any life-threatening danger. Not long after, the 9 of them finally arrived at the 4th floor. The space on the 4th floor seemed to be smaller than the 3rd floor. What was different was that there were 4 floating stone platforms in the center of the 4th floor. The stone platforms were not big and could only accommodate 1 person standing on them. Ling Shiqi and the others stepped into the 4th floor. They were all cautious and vigilant, but after a while, there was still no danger. Could it be another illusory array? Blood is no different asked, puzzled. Yushu walked to the 4 stone platforms with a thoughtful look. He said, it's not an illusory array. The test on this floor might be related to these 4 stone platforms. Ling Shiqi looked at the 4 stone platforms and had some guesses. He said, that's right. If I'm not wrong, only 4 people can pass this floor. Chapter 121. After Ling Shiqi finished speaking, everyone looked at the 4 stone platforms with eager gazes. Perhaps to prove that Ling Shiqi was right, the stone platforms suddenly released a ray of light and then disappeared. Immediately after, the stone platforms began to slowly rise. Although the rise was very slow, it would only take another incense stick of time for it to rise to a height they couldn't reach even if they jumped. This meant that the 9 people present would have to kill each other to compete for the 4 spots. And they didn't have much time. They were all very smart people and quickly understood the meaning behind this. They looked at each other in dismay. They had fought side by side for a long time, and now they were about to kill each other. This was a bit difficult for them to accept. However, in the face of the great terror of life and death, no one would choose death. Their gazes gradually changed. They no longer trusted or cared for him. Instead, cold killing intent slowly emerged. At this moment, Ling Shiqi moved and stood on a stone platform in the blink of an eye. He slowly pulled out his blade and his aura continued to rise, giving off bursts of powerful aura. Spirit Transformation Realm. The expressions of the others changed. They originally thought that this vice leader was only at the peak of the pure spirit realm and still had a trace of fantasy in their hearts. However, at this moment, they completely destroyed this fantasy. They were not a match for Dark Crow. Yushu's expression was very calm. When Ling Shiqi attacked on the first floor, he had noticed Ling Shiqi's cultivation, so he wasn't surprised. Moreover, Yushu could also guess that the reason why Ling Shiqi revealed his cultivation at this moment was because he didn't want to fight with everyone and let them back off. Then Yushu also circulated his spirit force and erupted with the spirit pressure of the spirit transformation realm. No one dared to stop him. Standing on the stone platform, Yushu looked at everyone. When he saw the hidden killing intent in their eyes, Yushu's heart turned cold. But when he saw Hua Lingling, his heart softened again. At this time, Hua Lingling had just regained her consciousness and was still a little weak. She definitely could not exert her full strength. If she were to fight with someone else, her chances of survival would be slim. As if she had seen through Yushu's thoughts, Hua Lingling smiled gently and said, "Let me fight. No matter what the outcome is, I have no regrets." Yushu didn't say anything. Instead, he slowly closed his eyes. He didn't want to see his own people killing each other. This was like a signal, and soon after, the 7 of them began to fight. Ling Shiqi, on the other hand, had been watching their battles. Among the 7 of them, he was undoubtedly most optimistic about Mu 21, Blood is no different, and Hua Lingling. This was because their cultivation was at the late stage of the pure spirit realm, while the other 4 were only at the middle stage of the pure spirit realm. Although Hua Lingling's condition was not good, she had followed Yushu for the longest time and was also in charge of the upper echelons of the Yushu clan. It was impossible to say that she did not have any trump cards in her hands. Time slowly passed, and at this time, Ling Shiqi and Yushu were already a person's height away from the ground. The battle below was no different from what Ling Shiqi had expected. The 4 spirit cultivators at the middle stage of the pure spirit realm were the first to die. There were only Hua Lingling, Mu 21, and Blood is no different left. However, there were only 2 positions. From Ling Shiqi's point of view, he naturally hoped that Mu 21 and Blood is no different would win. These 2 people were more or less related to him. In his opinion, Mu 21 and Blood is no different could join forces to besiege Hua Lingling. This way, they would all be able to obtain the qualifications to enter the next level. But from Yushu's point of view, it was best for the 3 of them to fight on their own. The result was exactly not what Ling Shiqi had expected. The 3 of them were now fighting on their own. Hua Lingling swung her sword to deflect Blood is no different spear, but Mu 21's attack had also arrived. When Mu 21 touched Hua Lingling, his hand strangely wrapped around Hua Lingling's arm. It was the vine entanglement technique. At this time, Hua Lingling was already somewhat exhausted. A few traces of ruthlessness flashed past her eyes. She abandoned the sword in her right hand and a chess piece slipped out from her sleeve. She suddenly flicked it, and the chess piece suddenly shot towards Mu 21. Mu 21's expression changed drastically and he hurriedly retreated, but the distance between the two of them was too close. After the chess piece shot out, it grew in the wind and turned into a huge chess piece with the word, suppress, engraved on it. Mu 21 could not dodge in time and was heavily pressed to the ground by the chess piece. The sound of bones cracking could be heard. Then, the chess piece suddenly disappeared. Mu 21 was lying on the ground covered in blood. His eyes were staring blankly at the top. He was barely breathing. There was not much time left. Go, Mu 21 said weakly, his tone very calm. Hua Lingling turned her head away and did not look at him. She muttered, don't blame me. To be able to live until now. I'm already very satisfied, Mu 21 said intermittently. Then, Hua Lingling and Blood is no different looked at each other and leaped onto the last two stone platforms together. The stone platforms continued to rise as huge cracks began to appear on the ground. Mu 21's gaze finally landed on Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi also lowered his head to look at him. Just as Mu 21's vitality was about to dissipate, Ling Shiqi took off his mask and threw it down. Then I'll let Raven accompany you. At this point, only 4 of the 46 people who had entered the blood-colored tower were left. The 4 people on the stone platforms all had heavy hearts. None of them spoke. Soon, the stone platforms rose into another space. This was a very small room. It was completely bare inside. There was nothing but a stone door in front of them. Ling Shiqi and the other 3 walked down the stone platforms and carefully inspected the place. When they did not find any traps, he said, you guys recover your spiritual power first. I'll protect you guys. Yushu and the other 2 did not stand on ceremony. They found a corner and sat down cross-legged to circulate their qi. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ling Shiqi used the breath-concealing technique to conceal his cultivation level. He only revealed that he was at the 9th level of the pure spirit realm. Yushu did not consume much spiritual power, so he finished very quickly. However, Hua Lingling and Blood is no different had just experienced a great battle. Especially when Hua Lingling was still injured, she would need a long time to recover. However, they did not have that much time. About half an hour later, the stone door of the room suddenly opened by itself. An inexplicable force pushed them out. Then, the stone door closed by itself. Ling Shiqi looked left and right. The scene in front of them was similar to the previous floors. However, there were also 3 stone doors on the walls in the other 3 directions. Then, the 3 stone doors opened one after another, and more than 10 people emerged from them. Upon closer inspection, they were people from Blood Moon, Seiji, and the Qingyan League. After they came out, they also looked around and found people from other forces. Ling Shiqi first looked at Blood Moon. As expected, Delta Origi and Ah Chen were there. There were also 2 spirit cultivators at the late stage of the pure spirit realm. At the same time, Delta Origi also looked over. Their eyes met in the air, and then they silently looked away. The people from the other 2 forces were Xiongming, Extreme Evil, Qin Yan, and Yan Feilin. Xiongming's cultivation level was already at the spirit transformation realm. However, when Qin Yan saw that Dark Crow from the Yushu clan was not there, she felt a burst of joy. Then, she had other thoughts. Chapter 122. 16 people from 4 different factions were gathered here. After they looked at each other, Ji Sha was the first to speak. He said to Qin Yan in a strange tone, luckily, we didn't agree to work with someone. Otherwise, we wouldn't be standing here with just 16 people. Qin Yan looked at Extreme Evil with displeasure, but she didn't flare up. Instead, she spoke to Yushu. Leader Yu, I remember that you have someone called Dark Crow. He's very strong. Why don't I see him? Ling Shiqi had already taken off his mask, revealing his true face. But now, only Yushu's group in Delta Origi had seen Ling Shiqi's true face. Everyone else who had seen him was dead. Therefore, no one knew that he was actually Dark Crow. Yushu chuckled in his heart, but he deliberately put on an ugly expression and said in an unfriendly tone, "Qingyan League leader, you should mind your own business." Just as Qingyan was about to say something, a huge spiritual formation suddenly appeared on the ground. The spiritual formation shone with a dense blood-red light, and a huge figure gradually rose from the ground. Qingyan and the others all closed their mouths and stared at the figure. It was a strange demon beast that was more than 10 feet tall. It was strange because its upper body was that of a bull, and its thick arms carried 2 pitch-black pitchforks. However, its lower body was that of a long snake. The intersection of the two bodies seemed to be sewn together by red silk threads, and a faint blood-red light could be seen coming out. There were also 8 chains in the spiritual formation that tightly bound the demon beast. It kept struggling and roaring, but the chains didn't move at all. Ling Shiqi silently drew his spiritual sword and was on full alert. Everyone else was the same. They could all guess that this might be the last test. Demonic beasts that could be used as the final test were definitely not easy to deal with. After the demonic beasts in the spiritual array appeared, the 8 Vajra chains suddenly retracted, and the spiritual array disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. The moment the chains and the spiritual array disappeared, the demonic beast roared towards the sky, and a ferocious sound wave reverberated outwards. Everyone covered their ears in pain. What was even more terrifying was that a powerful and terrifying aura was being emitted from the demonic beast's body. It was an aura that was enough to make everyone despair. That aura pressed down on everyone's body, causing everyone's face to turn pale. This was definitely not a rank 2 monster beast. Behind the Delta Origi, Ah Chen shouted in horror, Is this a rank 3 monster? Although the others didn't say anything, they all had the same thought in their minds. Originally, they thought that they had already paid enough attention to this demonic beast, but unexpectedly, this demonic beast's strength had far exceeded their expectations. Would they be able to pass the final test? Among this group of people, only Ling Shiqi knew that this demonic beast wasn't a rank 3 monster. This was because when he accidentally entered the underground space for the first time, he accidentally heard the conversation between Meng Wanshan and Zhuolaogui. He knew that the Blood Mist Island didn't seem to be able to contain a rank 3 monster. And this strange demonic beast in front of them should be the blood fusion beast that Zhuolaogui spoke of. Ling Shiqi whispered to Yushu, "This is a blood fusion beast. Its strength is comparable to a rank 3 monster, but it's not very stable. While the demonic beast is not ready to attack, we should take the initiative and attack its stitches." Yushu didn't know how Ling Shiqi obtained this information, but he didn't have any suspicions and didn't ask any questions. He shouted, "Everyone! At this final step, I don't think anyone is willing to die here. Don't hide anymore, we should take the initiative and attack the stitches with all our strength." The people from the other 3 forces weren't stupid. They knew that only by working together would they have a chance of survival. When Yushu's voice fell, they all nodded solemnly. Ling Shiqi's spirit power revolved and his left hand lit up with starlight. Then, he quickly formed a dozen spirit seals. A circular spirit formation suddenly appeared in front of him, and a large amount of cold air gathered in the spirit formation. In the blink of an eye, the cold air condensed into a 3-meter-long ice sword. Ling Shiqi pushed his hands forward and the ice sword suddenly flew out. This was Ling Shiqi's fusion of Spirit Attack and Frost Sword Qi, Spirit Attack Ice Giant Sword. Yushu didn't pay much attention to Ling Shiqi's movements. He threw out a chess piece. This chess piece was very similar to the one that Hua Lingling used before, but the word seal was written on it. However, when the others saw Ling Shiqi make such a giant ice sword, their expressions were different, but they were all shocked. They didn't expect this person to be a spirit caster. But how come they had never seen or heard of him before? Of course, they didn't have the time to think about this now. Most of them took out different but powerful things. These were basically their trump cards, but they didn't hesitate to use them at this time. However, they didn't expect these things to be able to kill the monster. They just wanted to weaken it as much as possible before the real battle. Ling Shiqi's Frost Greatsword was the first to pierce through the seams of the fused blood beast. However, to everyone's surprise, the Frost Greatsword was only able to pierce through a little before it was unable to penetrate any further. Ling Shiqi narrowed his eyes and the spirit seal in his hand changed. The giant ice sword turned into a large amount of cold air and covered the upper body of the blood beast. In the blink of an eye, a layer of ice crystals formed. At the same time, Yushu's chess piece smashed down, and at the same time, 7 strange things flew over. In an instant, all kinds of fire, thunder, and wind blades whistled and smashed into the stitches of the blood beast's abdomen, causing the entire space to be filled with rolling waves of spiritual power. Everyone stared at the blood beast. Ling Shiqi pulled the hood on his head and quietly opened his supercilious eyes. Through his supercilious eyes, he could see that the spiritual power in the blood beast's body had indeed weakened and was a little unstable. When the light dissipated, the blood beast's body was revealed. There was a small hole on its head, which should have been hit by Yushu's chess piece. There were several different kinds of wounds on its abdomen, but none of them were deep. Everyone's attacks did hurt it, but it was only a light injury. The merged blood beast had just escaped from the trap, and before it could start a massacre, it was beaten to a pulp. It waved its arms furiously and threw the pair of pitchforks at the people from the Netherworld office. Meng Ming, extreme evil, and the others instantly scattered and retreated. However, one of them was still a step too slow due to the terrifying aura of the blood beast, and was instantly pierced through by the pitchforks. He couldn't be any more dead. Everyone was shocked when they saw this scene. That person was at the 8th level of the pure spirit realm, but he couldn't even withstand a single attack. Chapter 123. The power of the merged blood beast exceeded everyone's expectations, but at this point, there was no turning back. The only thing left for them was to fight to the death. After the merged blood beast killed one person, the first to make a move was Xiong Ming, who was closest to it. Xiong Ming held 2 strange purple scimitars in his hands. After injecting his spiritual power into them, purple patterns appeared on the scimitars, releasing beams of mesmerizing purple light. Xiong Ming had also cultivated movement techniques. His body moved, and 2 thin purple beams of light flashed through the air, slashing at the merged blood beast's snake tail. Delta Origi was 1 step behind him. She held an azure longsword, and judging from its quality, it was also a 3rd stage spirit sword. She used her bewildering footwork technique, and with a swing of her longsword, hundreds of azure sword lights instantly engulfed the merged blood beast. Yushu, Qingyan, and the others also followed in a timely manner. In the instant that Xiong Ming's dual blade slashed down, the merged blood beast twisted its body in an attempt to evade. However, right at this moment, 6 earthen pillars as thick as an arm suddenly erupted from the ground, trapping the merged blood beast in place. The one who made this move was none other than Ling Shiqi. Now that he was a step closer to developing the hand of the earth, and with the breakthrough in his cultivation, it was no problem for him to summon 6 earthen pillars in an instant. Even though the 6 earthen pillars were shattered by the merged blood beast in the blink of an eye, everyone's attacks had already arrived in that short period of time. Xiong Ming's dual blade slashed out, leaving 2 deep gashes on the merged blood beast's snake tail. The merged blood beast's arms suddenly turned, and it raised its 2 pitchforks, but they were blocked by Delta Origi's countless sword lights. Immediately afterward, Yushu's saber lights, Qingyan's fists, and everyone else's attacks also landed on the merged blood beast's body. More than a dozen powerful attacks left wounds all over the merged blood beast's snake body. Among them, Xiongming, Yushu, and Qing Yan were the ones who left the most severe wounds. At this moment, a bang was heard. The fused blood beast had crushed all the sword lights and sent Delta Origi flying. However, it did not have enough strength left. She continued to dissipate the force of the attack in mid-air and finally landed lightly on the ground. Obviously, she was not injured at all. Then, the fused blood beast swung its tail, trying to fling all the ants away. However, at this moment, a thick earthen wall rose from the ground and helped everyone to slow down. Taking advantage of this gap, everyone retreated. Unfortunately, one of them was still sent flying by the snake's tail and crashed into the wall in the distance. Moreover, his entire body sank into the wall. Viscous blood could be seen flowing out from the wound. The power of the fused blood beast's tail was so strong. The eyes of the fused blood beast burst out with two bloody rays. It looked around with a ferocious expression, and its gaze finally locked onto the Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi suddenly felt an invisible pressure pressing down on his heart, making him a little breathless. However, he did not panic at all. He raised his arms and erected three thick earthen walls in front of him. Then, a layer of black mist rose from under his feet and he quickly dodged. Almost at the same time, the fused blood beast twisted its huge body and charged onto the earthen walls in a few seconds. The three earthen walls crumbled like paper, but Ling Shiqi had already dodged out of the way. After Ling Shiqi stood still, he did not stay idle. His left hand flashed and a large amount of cold air condensed before him to form a giant ice sword. He pushed with both hands and the giant ice sword flew out, stabbing into the wound caused by Xiongming's attack. This time, the giant ice sword pierced 1/3 of the way in. At the same time, extremely cold air and a few rays of sword energy burst out and mercilessly eroded the flesh of the fused blood beast's tail. Even so, the fused blood beast did not care about the injury to its tail and immediately charged at Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi could not help but curse. He had hidden his strength before so that he would not be noticed by the fused blood beast, but he was still targeted. He did not know why his hatred was so great. If this continued, he would have to reveal his strength. Unexpectedly, just as the fused blood beast charged over, a person suddenly appeared next to it. It was Delta Origi. But now, Goose-san was a bit unimaginable. Her black hair had turned white, and her face had become abnormally pale, but the aura on her body had become a bit stronger. Delta Origi's green sword shot out streaks of sharp light. The green sword successfully pierced the fused blood beast's flesh, but it could not stop its advance. Delta Origi had an idea. She grabbed the hilt of her sword and poured spirit force into her legs to stop the fused blood beast. The fused blood beast did not slow down in the slightest. Instead, a long sword mark appeared on its body. Ling Shiqi held the sword in his right hand and his left hand clenched into a fist. He was ready to attack at any moment. After Goose-san made his move, Ling Shiqi was surprised to see that Meng Ming also made his move. He swung his arms, and two streaks of purple light pierced through the air, piercing into the back of the blood beast. At the same time, Yushu also arrived. He jumped high into the air and slashed down with a giant blade energy. The three spirit transformation realm cultivators finally managed to hinder the fused blood beast a bit. Seeing this, Ling Shiqi quickly used the ghost parade and confusion movement technique to escape. Boom! The fused blood beast's two pitchforks smashed into the ground, creating a deep hole. Ling Shiqi's eyes were filled with intelligence. He pointed with his spirit sword and turned into 9 afterimages that stabbed out at the same time. The 9 afterimages formed a circle and each sword carried a light blue sword energy as they stabbed into the fused blood beast's lower abdomen. Puff, puff, puff. 9 small sword marks appeared on the fused blood beast's body and 9 waves of cold energy invaded it. This was the chaotic flower dazzling eyes that had fused with the cold sword energy. The cold energy entered the fused blood beast's body and caused it to stiffen for a moment. Chin hesitated for a moment, but he immediately took out a brown cylinder. He opened it and pressed the mechanism at the end. Immediately, a black object shot into the air and landed on top of the blood beast's head. Following that, 10 sharp black short arrows suddenly shot down. However, those short arrows were not aimed at the blood beast, but at the ground around it. The black mass in the air instantly expanded and turned into a large black net that slid down, trapping the fusion blood fiend within. The fused blood beast immediately waved its arms and twisted its snake tail, but it didn't know what material the black net was made of. It was abnormally tough and didn't break. Chance. This thought appeared in everyone's mind. They all rushed forward and used their most powerful spirit techniques. Qin Yan, who hadn't made a move yet, suddenly made her fists bigger. Then her fists became extremely red like iron that had been burned for a long time. At the same time, Ling Shiqi clenched his fists and smashed them out like a tiger stepping on the waves. Chapter 124. Ling Shiqi's ferocious tiger-treading wave fist slammed into the fusion blood beast's abdomen. The yin and yang fists blasted out and finally tore a hole. Especially the internal strength that was constantly stirring its meridians and flesh. The fusion blood beast trembled in pain. At this time, in Ling Shiqi's vision, the fusion blood beast's spiritual energy was rapidly gathering at its head, condensing into a ball. At this moment, Ling Shiqi's mind flashed as if he had thought of something. At the same time, the attacks of the others fell. The fusion blood beast's injuries increased, especially the snake tail that was almost broken. The fusion blood beast suddenly burst out a bloody wave from its body. The 2 tridents were surrounded by a bloody light. With its chi-lot sound, the black net that bound it was instantly cut into pieces. The fused blood beast waved its arms and slapped away the people who couldn't react in time. Immediately, several people died on the spot. Then, the fusion blood beast raised its body high and a large hole opened at the back of its neck. Then, a huge snake head emerged from it. The snake head opened its bloody mouth and sprayed out a large amount of green mucus. The green mucus emitted a disgusting stench, but no one cared about it. Because anyone who was sprayed by the green mucus was instantly corroded into bones. In addition, there were a few people who were only grazed a little and had small holes corroded into their bodies. What was even more frightening was that a lot of the green mucus splashed on the ground, seriously hindering their movements. Ling Shiqi suddenly shouted at this time, "This snake head is its weakness." He did not care about other people's suspicions. A longbow and several arrows suddenly appeared in his hand. He quickly knocked the bow and several sharp arrows wrapped in rich spiritual energy shot directly at the snake head. The fusion blood beast seemed to feel the threat and turned its body to block the snake head behind it. However, Ling Shiqi's arrow made a sharp turn in the air and accurately hit the snake's head. Boom, hiss, the 2 heads that had fused with the blood beast let out miserable shrieks at the same time. At the same time, they kept twisting their bodies, making it impossible for anyone to get close. The fork in Oxhead's hand suddenly changed direction and smashed towards Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi was too close to the fused blood beast. This sudden attack caught him off guard. Even if he used Ghost Parade and Confusion footwork, he could not completely dodge it. At this critical moment, Ling Shiqi retreated and shouted in a low voice. Then his whole body showed a silvery white color, and his momentum rose by a notch. Ling Shiqi instantly activated the silver-scaled fire-armored crocodile's beast essence battle pattern. In his mind, he had the flowing ink cloak on the outside and the beast chi battle pattern on the inside. In addition, his body was not weak. Even if he was hit, he would not be seriously injured. But he was wrong. It wasn't that he had misjudged the attack power of the fused blood fiend, but that he had misjudged someone. That was, blood is no different. Just as the fork was about to fall, blood is no different suddenly appeared in front of Ling Shiqi. Blood is no different raised the spear in his hand. He did not stab out, but swept it out like a stick. However, his attack was nothing in front of the fused blood fiend. The spear was split in half in an instant. The fork pierced through blood is no different's body. With blood is no different blocking, Ling Shiqi also retreated. But at this time, his eyes were wide open and a somewhat complicated expression appeared on his face. He never thought that blood is no different would use his own life to block an attack for him. Blood is no different. Ling Shiqi shouted these 3 words in an indescribable tone. His voice contained doubt, confusion, anger, and regret. Blood is no different smiled softly and said intermittently, "You spared my life, I will repay you with my life, it's only right, of course, only right." Hearing these words, Ling Shiqi's mind instantly returned to the scene when he attacked Bailey Qing. Blood is no different had risked his life to stop him. At that time, Ling Shiqi had asked him why he risked his life to protect Bailey Qing. Blood is no different said, "He saved my life, it's only right that I repay him with my life." Ling Shiqi still remembered clearly the stubborn and proud expression on Blood is no different's face. At that time, Ling Shiqi didn't kill him not because he was soft-hearted, but because he felt a trace of admiration in his heart. On this Blood Fog Island, there were very few people who could still uphold their pride and their beliefs. Ling Shiqi admitted that he couldn't do this. At that time, Ling Shiqi even felt a bit of jealousy. He was jealous that someone was willing to die for Bailey Qing. But now, there was someone who was willing to die for him. That person was Blood is no different. Ha ha ha. Ling Shiqi suddenly laughed. Only right, what a good only right. He laughed, but his laughter was full of regret and annoyance. At this moment, Ling Shiqi regretted hiding his strength for the first time. If he had revealed his full strength from the beginning, Blood is no different would know that the blood beast fusion couldn't kill him. Blood is no different naturally wouldn't have sacrificed himself to save him. If Blood is no different had died at the hands of the blood beast fusion, or even at the hands of others, Ling Shiqi might have only felt pity. However, Blood is no different had died for him, and in vain. Bang bang. At this moment, the blood beast fusion unleashed its might, and the people around it were either killed or crippled. Delta Origi was bathed in blood, and Yushu collapsed to the ground, Ling Shiqi's pupils dilated. He had never felt such regret in his 2 lives. He always thought that he was a heartless person and always tried to suppress his emotions. In fact, in his heart, he had long regarded Blood as no different as a friend, Yushu as a brother, and Delta Origi as a confidant. However, he never dared to admit it. He was afraid that once he had feelings, he would be indecisive. He suddenly felt that he was even more ridiculous, and it was ridiculous that he had comforted Yushu. It turned out that he was an extremely ridiculous, heartless lover. Bedump, bedump. At this moment, Ling Shiqi could clearly hear his own heartbeat, and he knew his own heart. Ling Shiqi took 1 step forward, 2 steps, 3 steps. With every step he took, his figure grew taller and bigger. Every time he took a step, his muscles would bulge up a little. With every step he took, his aura increased by a notch. Roar! Finally, Ling Shiqi opened his mouth and let out a beast-like roar. At this moment, he was already as tall as an adult, and his muscles bulged. The outer layer of his white robe was torn to shreds, and his eyes were faintly flickering with blood. At this moment, Ling Shiqi actually activated the spiritual ruin beast king and the silver-scaled fire-armored crocodile at the same time. The rest of the people looked at Ling Shiqi in shock. Ling Shiqi's strength was far beyond their imagination. Chapter 125. Ling Shiqi, who had activated 2 Beast Origin battle runes, suddenly jumped out and smashed toward the Fusion Blood Beast like a cannonball. The Fusion Blood Beast waved its arm and swatted Ling Shiqi away like it was swatting a fly. With a bang, Ling Shiqi smashed into the wall above him. However, he was not injured at all and did not fall down. Instead, he used his chakra movement technique to stand upside down on the wall. His eyes were filled with boundless killing intent. Ling Shiqi found an opportunity and raised his spear. His body was filled with a domineering aura, and he stabbed down. The spear shook rapidly in the air and drew a huge bloody cross in the air. It crashed down with a terrifying amount of spirit force. The Fusion Blood Beast felt the danger from above and raised its head. At the same time, it swung its 2 pitchforks to meet the attack. When the spear and pitchforks collided, a terrifying shockwave suddenly exploded. Huge amounts of spirit force spread out and forced everyone to retreat. With a "kacha" sound, Ling Shiqi's long spear was the first to break apart. Fortunately, the cross spear managed to block the Fusion Blood Beast's attack. Ling Shiqi used the force to quickly change direction in the air and landed on the back of the Fusion Blood Beast. Following closely behind was a magnificent saber light that resembled a crescent moon. It was the half-moon light slash. And it was the half-moon light slash that Ling Shiqi used with all his strength. Meng Ming, Qing Yan, and the others immediately recognized that this was a powerful sword technique that only the Dark Crow knew. It turned out that Ling Shiqi was the Dark Crow. Qing Yan's face suddenly became pale and he felt a lingering fear in his heart. He remembered that when he gathered everyone to discuss the alliance, he had attacked Ling Shiqi. If Ling Shiqi had erupted with this level of combat power, even if he was at the spirit transformation realm, he wouldn't have been able to last more than a few moves. Ling Shiqi's half-moon light slash was aimed at the snake's head, but unexpectedly, the snake's head retreated back into its body. Ling Shiqi had no choice but to change his target at the last moment, and the blade slashed at the back of the blood beast's neck. Rip! The magnificent saber light tore open a deep wound on the neck of the fused blood beast, revealing half of its snake head. At this moment, the snake head opened its bloody mouth and spat out a stream of green mucus. It was too late for Ling Shiqi to dodge. Instead, he raised his sword to protect his heart. The 5 fingers of his other hand clenched into a fist. Instantly, an incomparably turbulent fist force smashed down brazenly like a ferocious tiger breaking the waves. At the same time, the snake head spat out green mucus onto Ling Shiqi's body. The mucus sprayed on his spirit saber and made a chi-chi sound. In a few breaths of time, a large hole appeared on the spirit saber and the green mucus adhered to the flowing ink robe. The flowing ink robe immediately lit up, but in the end, it was unable to block the green mucus. In the end, the green mucus made contact with Ling Shiqi's body. However, at this moment, Ling Shiqi's body was covered in silver scales. The scales were extremely hard and resisted the green mucus. However, because the silver scales were actually Ling Shiqi's skin, the searing pain still spread throughout his body. Ling Shiqi didn't make a sound and smashed down with the fierce tiger wave stomping fist. There was a "poochie" sound and the snake head was instantly shattered by the fist force. The fused blood beast's body suddenly twitched as if it was spasming. The others were still shocked by Ling Shiqi's terrifying strength, but now that there was a chance, they all attacked once more. After Ling Shiqi shattered the snake's head, he saw a fist-sized blood-red bead under the snake's head. He had a flash of inspiration. He guessed that this was the bloodly bead that Zhuolao Gui had mentioned. This was the core of the fused blood beast. Ling Shiqi's eyes were filled with endless ferocity. He took out a purple-blue bead from the system space and stuffed it into the fused blood beast's wound. That was the righteous thunder bead. It was comparable to the full power of a mid-stage spirit transformation realm cultivator and was the bane of evil things like the fused blood beast. After throwing out the righteous thunder bead, Ling Shiqi quickly jumped off the fused blood beast's body. Immediately after, there was a rumbling sound, as if there was thunder. The sound of thunder came from the fused blood beast's body. Then more and more thunder rumbled. Bolts of purple lightning shot out and covered the fused blood beast's body. The purple lightning seemed to have a great restraining effect on the fused blood beast. The fused blood beast couldn't move and black smoke kept coming out of its body. Its bloody mouth was wide open, but it couldn't make any sound. Its flesh and blood had been almost completely destroyed by the righteous thunder bead. When Ling Shiqi saw this, he felt a bit of joy in his heart. However, he suddenly noticed something strange with his white eyes. The fused blood beast's spirit force and blood began to boil. The fused blood beast's body also began to swell a bit. Ling Shiqi knew that something was wrong and immediately shouted, "Retreat! It might self-destruct." The moment he finished speaking, everyone else immediately retreated. Yushu protected Hua Lingling and said to Ling Shiqi, "Brother Ling, come here." When Ling Shiqi saw Yushu take off a jade pendant from his waist, he immediately flashed to Yushu's side. Yushu smashed the jade pendant in his hand. Then, the jade pendant surged with spirit force and spun continuously. In an instant, it turned into a circular shield. There were strange runes on the shield. Ling Shiqi was still a bit worried behind the shield. Immediately, his spirit force surged out and he raised his arms. 5 thick earth walls rose in front of him. Right after Ling Shiqi raised the earthen wall, countless rays of blood-red light shot out from the blood-fused beast, and then its entire body exploded. Boom boom boom, deafening explosions continued to sound. Waves of terrifying shockwaves mixed with the remains of the fused blood beast swept out. Ling Shiqi's 5 earth walls only lasted for 3 breaths of time before they all shattered. In the end, the shockwaves crashed into Yushu's spirit shield, causing the spirit shield to suddenly distort. In the blink of an eye, a few cracks appeared on the spirit shield. Ling Shiqi saw that the spirit shield was about to collapse. His left hand flashed and quickly gathered a large amount of cold air. After the cold air surged out, it didn't condense into a sword. Instead, it turned into an ice wall. Waves of shockwaves mixed with the remains of the fused blood beast continued to rush over. Yushu's spirit shield finally couldn't hold on and shattered into specks of spirit force. Fortunately, the shockwaves of the shockwaves weren't too big. Ling Shiqi's ice wall was finally blocked. When everything calmed down, Ling Shiqi's body finally couldn't hold on anymore. He automatically removed the beast essence battle patterns of the Spirit Ruin Beast King and the Silver Scale Fire Armored Crocodile. The moment he removed the beast essence battle patterns, he felt powerless and suddenly collapsed to the ground. He felt bursts of pain coming from his body. It was as if his bones and meridians were being torn apart. Not only that, but there were also countless small bloody marks on his body. What was worse was that both his spirit force and mental force were almost exhausted. It could be said that he didn't even have 10% of his combat strength left. Ling Shiqi quickly took out a few pills and swallowed them. At this moment, he couldn't care about the side effects. He continued to forcefully maintain the supercilious eyes and wanted to see the situation. What made him feel relieved was that the spirit force and aura of the fused blood beast were completely gone. It was truly dead. At this moment, he let out a sigh of relief. He looked around. Including the 3 of them, there were still 4 people alive. They were Delta Origi, Chen, Xiongming, and Qingyan. At this moment, there were only 7 people left on the entire Blood Mist Island. However, just as Ling Shiqi was about to retract his eyes, the corners of his eyes suddenly twitched. He had clearly seen 7 people just now, but now there was an extra person who had appeared out of nowhere. And that person was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he was behind one of them. Behind Hua Lingling. Chapter 126. Ling Shiqi suddenly felt a chill on his back. Just as he was about to warn her, he heard a poochie sound. A figure had strangely appeared behind Hua Lingling and a sharp dagger had already pierced her back. Puff! Hua Lingling coughed out a mouthful of blood and the vitality in her eyes quickly dissipated. At this moment, Yushu's mind went blank with a boom. Hua Lingling. Yushu's eyes instantly became bloodshot and he turned to look at the person who had attacked. Ling Shiqi also saw this person and was very surprised to find that this person was Yan Feilin. In Ling Shiqi's impression, Yan Feilin was a person with a very low sense of existence. He was like an old dog by Qin Yan's side, obeying only Qin Yan and never having his own opinions. Ling Shiqi vaguely remembered that during the battle with the fusion blood beast, Yan Feilin seemed to have been sent flying. Everyone thought he was dead. After that, Ling Shiqi's attention was focused on the fusion blood beast and he didn't pay much attention to the others. However, he never would have thought that Yan Feilin had been hiding himself the entire time. He had watched the fusion blood beast fight and waited for the dust to settle before stabbing them in the back. Was he not afraid that the fusion blood beast would kill everyone? Now that the fusion blood beast had just died, the few people who survived immediately began to fight among themselves. Yushu was extremely angry and filled with hatred. The moment he attacked, blade energy filled the sky and swept toward Yan Feilin like a torrential rain. For Yan Feilin, his target from the beginning was the Yushu clan. The reason he chose Hua Lingling was because Yushu and Ling Shiqi were both at the spirit transformation realm. Even if they were injured, Yan Feilin wasn't confident he could kill them in one blow. That was why Hua Lingling was the best target. However, when he saw Yushu's torrential blade light descending, his heart shook. Immediately after, he hurriedly moved his body and dodged those blade lights. It turned out that he had also cultivated a movement spirit technique, and it didn't look like it was a low-rank one. However, Yan Feilin didn't expect a few thick pillars to rise from the ground under his feet. Normally, these things wouldn't be able to trap him and he could break free at any time. However, right now he was under Yushu's blade energy, and a small mistake could cost him his life. Yushu and Yan Feilin's battle was only one side. After Yan Feilin's sneak attack on Hua Lingling, everyone began to move. Xiongming and Qin Yan were to attack to kill Ling Shiqi and Yushu respectively. Xiongming was very fast. He suddenly appeared before Ling Shiqi and slashed down with his 2 purple blades. Ling Shiqi sensed danger the moment Xiongming moved. He turned around and hid behind the ice wall from before. At the same time, he waved his hand and a purple crow appeared before him. The crow flew toward Qin Yan and stopped Qin Yan, who was charging toward Yushu. This purple crow was naturally the purple feather. In fact, not long ago, Ling Shiqi had discovered that the purple feather could be placed in the system space. However, after thinking about it, he understood that the purple feather didn't have an independent consciousness. It wasn't a living thing, so it could be placed in the system space. Ever since entering the blood-colored tower, Ling Shiqi had never used the purple feather because it was his only trump card that didn't consume spirit force. The other was of course the righteous thunder orb. It could be said that the purple feather was his last trump card. The purple feather played a key role in this moment. It bought a lot of time for Yushu. While they were fighting, something happened to Delta Origi. Delta Origi was heavily injured in the battle with the Blood Fiend. She was now covered in blood. She couldn't even stand properly and spat out a mouthful of blood. Ah Chen, who had been standing beside her, suddenly slammed his palm toward Delta Origi's head. However, a strange scene appeared. The blood that Gu San spat out did not land on the ground. Instead, it instantly condensed into a blood arrow in the air. With a whoosh, the blood arrow pierced Chen's heart. Chen's palms suddenly stopped. He looked at Delta Origi in disbelief and muttered, "You've been guarding against me for a long time." "That's right," Delta Origi said coldly. "Why? I'm so loyal to you. Why would you suspect me and guard against me?" Chen knew that he didn't have time, but he still didn't understand. He didn't want to die without knowing why. He had joined Delta Origi ever since they established the Blood Moon. He had always followed Delta Origi and sacrificed a lot for her. He had never done anything out of line. He really couldn't understand where he had exposed himself. Delta Origi walked to his side and whispered, "You're too loyal. I won't trust someone who's so loyal on Blood Mist Island." "Ha! It's because I'm too loyal that I'll be suspected. Delta Origi, one day you'll die from your own suspicion and arrogance." Chen fell to the ground weakly after saying this. The battles all happened at the same time. When Chen fell, Yan Feilin was also restrained by Ling Shiqi's hand of earth. Yushu's blade light swallowed him up. Even though Yan Feilin had movement techniques, he still couldn't dodge. His body was covered in blade wounds and he died in the end. Ling Shiqi hid behind the ice wall. When he saw that Yushu had taken care of Yan Feilin, he felt a bit more at ease. However, in the blink of an eye, the ice wall in front of him was cut into several pieces. 2 purple scimitars were right in front of him. Ling Shiqi didn't dodge. Instead, he pulled out his spirit sword and stabbed out 4 times. 2 invisible channel invading sword energies and 2 light blue frost sword energies shot out. Meng Ming swung his dual blades and shattered the frost sword energies. However, the other 2 channel invading sword energies stabbed into his lower abdomen. After the channel invading sword energies entered his body, they immediately sealed off the meridians in his abdomen. One had to know that the lower abdomen was where the Sea of Qi was located. When that area was sealed, most of Meng Ming's spirit energy was sealed. Of course, Meng Ming could still use his spirit energy to break the seal, but that would take time. Of course, Ling Shiqi wouldn't give Meng Ming time to break the seal. He raised his sword and was about to stab out when something unexpected happened. Purple Feather, who he'd sent to hold off Qin Yan, had fallen limply to the ground. Black smoke and sparks were rising from his body. Qin Yan's hands were covered in a layer of faint flames. However, he was in great pain as well. His palms were slightly charred. It seemed that he'd used some kind of secret technique to kill Purple Feather. Ling Shiqi had thought that Qin Yan was already heavily injured. Even though Purple Feather was a level lower than him, he should have been able to hold off Qin Yan. However, in this world, there was no such thing. Ling Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. Purple Feather wasn't sentient. In other words, it was an inanimate object. It was no different from a puppet. However, it had followed Ling Shiqi for a very long time. During the days when he cultivated alone, it was always Purple Feather that comforted him. Ling Shiqi didn't know what kind of feelings he had for Purple Feather. In any case, he was going to avenge its death. Intense killing intent flashed in his eyes. He first exchanged a glance with Yushu. Yushu nodded in tacit understanding, then swung his blade at Meng Ming. Meanwhile, Ling Shiqi walked toward Qin Yan with his sword in hand. Chapter 127. When Qin Yan saw Ling Shiqi walking over with a strong killing intent, he felt a little guilty. At this point, everyone had used up their trump cards and their spiritual force was almost depleted. It was time to fight. Unfortunately, Qin Yan's foundation as a spirit transformation realm cultivator was not stable. Also, he had personally witnessed Ling Shiqi severely injuring the fusion blood fiend. It could be said that without Ling Shiqi, they would have already died in the mouth of the fusion blood fiend. Therefore, he was not confident that he could stop Ling Shiqi. At this moment, he caught a glimpse of Delta Origi who had killed Chin. An idea flashed through his mind. He quickly said, "Delta Origi, there are only 2 people left from the Yushu clan. Let's join forces to kill this person and keep the Yushu clan in check. Then we'll fight to the death." Delta Origi held the green sword with a thoughtful expression. Seeing Delta Origi's reaction, Qin Yan was happy. He knew that there was hope. He continued, "Delta Origi, if you help me kill this person, I'll take you as my master. I won't go back on my word." "Okay, but if you go back on your word, I'll make you wish you were dead," Delta Origi said coldly. Hearing Delta Origi's reply, Qin Yan was overjoyed and felt more confident. "Delta Origi." Ling Shiqi's face suddenly became a little twisted. He shouted, "Qin Yan and I are settling our grudges. Why do you have to interfere?" Delta Origi pointed at him with the green sword and said, "You can only blame yourself for being a member of the Yushu clan." After saying that, a sharp sword light burst out from the 3 bone swords and pierced straight at him. Qin Yan threw out a punch and a palm respectively. 2 blazing waves of spiritual force blasted over. Ling Shiqi was being pincered. He hesitated and decided to meet force with force. His spirit sword moved, and like a startled swan, it pierced towards the Delta Origi. Clang! Ling Shiqi and Delta Origi's swords clashed. Both of them were able to block each other's swords, and neither of them could do anything to the other. Qin Yan thought that this was an excellent opportunity. The speed of his fist and palm increased by a bit, and just as Qin Yan was about to reach him, something that shocked him happened. Ling Shiqi and Delta Origi, who were originally fighting, suddenly turned around and stabbed at him at the same time. At this moment, Qin Yan turned pale with fright. However, the distance between them was too close, and he had no way of dodging. Qin Yan had no choice but to stake everything on this one attack. The power of his fist and palm increased by 30%. However, strangely, the figures of Ling Shiqi and Delta Origi disappeared from his sight at the same time. Qin Yan's heart skipped a beat, and he knew that something was wrong. Sure enough, in the next moment, 2 swords pierced through his back and pierced through his body. It was not until he died that he realized that Blood Moon had joined forces with the Yushu clan. Sadly, he was just overjoyed that he managed to win over the Delta Origi, but in the blink of an eye, he was killed by her sword. Everyone's battle started quickly and ended quickly as well. From Yan Feilin's sneak attack on Hua Lingling to Qin Yan's death, it only took a short time. Sneak attack, alliance, betrayal, counterattack, everything happened in a flash. After Qin Yan fell, Tong Ming, who was fighting with Yushu, felt his heart turn cold. There were only 4 of them left, and 3 of them were on the same side. The only ending that awaited him was death. Sure enough, Ling Shiqi and Delta Origi drew closer with their swords. At that moment, a buzzing sound came from the ground, and 2 5-meter-wide formations appeared. Mysterious runes flowed on the formations, but one of them was purple, and the other was golden. This sudden development caused Ling Shiqi and the others to stop. They looked at the 2 formations, and a myriad of thoughts flashed through their minds. Actually, it had been less than 10 minutes since they killed the fused demon beast. These 2 formations should have only appeared after the fused blood fiends had died. However, what were these 2 formations for? The 4 of them had this question in their minds. Just as they were puzzled, an old voice came from all directions. The last survivors of Blood Mist Island, these 2 formations are the transportation formations to leave Blood Mist Island's secret realm. However, only one of them is a true transportation formation. Make your choice. After saying this, the voice disappeared. Ling Shiqi and the others looked at each other. Hearing this, they were surprised, happy, and angry. They were happy that they had finally reached this step. They were the best of the 10,000 people, and they were only one step away from leaving Blood Mist Island. However, they were surprised that the test was still not over. There was still one last step. There was no intense struggle at this step, nor was there any scheming. There was only a choice between the two. If they made the right choice, they would live. If they made the wrong choice, they would die. This was a test of their luck. Ling Shiqi couldn't help but feel a sense of unwillingness and anger in his heart. Who knew how many bloody storms they had experienced, and how much deception they had experienced? In the end, they had to rely on luck to decide their life and death. The four of them looked more serious than the last, and they all fell into hesitation. However, Ling Shiqi immediately calmed down and kept thinking of a solution. Suddenly, Ling Shiqi's mind lit up, and he thought of a possible solution. Then, his gaze fell on Xiongming. Ling Shiqi gestured to Delta Origi, and the two of them flashed and suddenly appeared on either side of Xiongming. Then, two spirit swords were placed on his neck. Xiongming was completely unperturbed. He said calmly, "The winner takes all. Kill me if you want." Ling Shiqi reached out and grabbed the two purple scimitars in Xiongming's hands. He had been coveting these for a long time. He then said in a deep voice, "I won't kill you. On the contrary, I'll give you a chance to choose between life and death." Upon hearing Ling Shiqi's words, Xiongming immediately understood his intentions. He snorted coldly and said, "Humph, you want to use me to test which path is the right one? You're underestimating them. I have my own methods. You just have to tell me if you want to or not. If you don't want to, I won't make things difficult for you. However, you're giving up 50% of your chance of survival. Are you really willing to do that?" Ling Shiqi continued. His voice was filled with persuasion. Xiongming didn't hesitate and immediately replied, "If you really have a way, I'll agree." Ling Shiqi smiled and said, "Very well, I'll plant a spirit technique on you later. It'll hurt a bit, so bear with it. Then, you can choose any formation you want to enter." Xiongming nodded to show that he understood. Ling Shiqi immediately formed a spirit seal. Then, a red circle of light appeared on his palm. Within the circle of light, there was a lifelike centipede twisting. With a wave of his hand, the centipede burrowed into Xiongming's left arm. Ling Shiqi purposely chose this place. He was afraid that the perfected centipede curse would cause the heavily injured Xiongming to die from the pain. After the centipede curse entered his body, Xiongming's face was filled with pain. A layer of cold sweat appeared on his forehead, but he gritted his teeth and didn't make a sound. His eyes were filled with a strong desire to live. His gaze drifted back and forth between the two formations. A short while later, he resolutely walked into the golden formation. Then, his figure disappeared. Ling Shiqi hurriedly closed his eyes to sense the centipede curse's existence. If the centipede curse was still there, it meant that Xiongming wasn't dead. The golden formation was the path to survival. On the other hand, the purple formation was the path to survival. A few seconds later, Ling Shiqi suddenly opened his eyes. Chapter 128. In a dark hall, there were two old men in black robes, one standing and one sitting. In front of them was a huge golden spirit formation that slowly rotated, illuminating a corner of the hall. The old man who was standing was pacing back and forth, looking a little anxious, while the old man who was sitting was calm and composed. "Old Wood, can you stop for a moment? You're going to make me go blind with your pacing. You're over 200 years old, why are you still so impatient?" The sitting old man said impatiently. The old man who was standing, the old man who the other person called Old Wood, suddenly stopped and said with a trace of anxiousness, "Old Bones, it's easy for you to say that. It's not like you don't know how much our blood clothing pavilion has paid for this matter. Now it's finally time to wrap things up. What if no one comes out?" Old Bones stroked his long beard and said indifferently, "Those who survived to the end must have worked together to kill the blood beast. At the very least, there should be a few people who survived. How could no one have come out?" "You are overthinking. What should we do if they all choose the path of death?" "Sigh, I said there was no need to do this. Those who can survive to the end are definitely the best," Old Wood said hatefully. Old Bones shook his head and said slowly, "No, no. Since ancient times, all the almighty beings have been people with talent, comprehension, shrewdness, will, and luck. What we need is a peerless prodigy who can lead the Blood Rope Pavilion to break this stalemate." The old blockhead puckered his lips and intended to say something, but right at this moment, the golden formation suddenly trembled, and then a figure appeared from within it. It was Xiongming. Xiongming suddenly came here and immediately tried to look around while enduring the pain. But suddenly, an old face appeared in front of him. That old face had an exaggerated smile as it looked at him. Xiongming's body shook and he quickly retreated. But he found that he couldn't move his body at all. The owner of that old face was naturally Old Wood. Old Wood saw someone finally come out and excitedly jumped over. He said kindly, "Child, what's your name? You're the best on Blood Mist Island, right?" Xiongming's eyes flashed. At this moment, he knew he had made the right bet. "Oh." Before Meng Ming could say anything, the blood-red centipede inside his body gnawed at his meridians again, and he couldn't help but let out a muffled moan. "Oh." Old Blockhead raised his eyebrows and said softly, "So you have a little plaything in your body. Don't worry, let me take it out for you." Old Blockhead extended 2 fingers and was just about to take out the blood-colored centipede when the golden formation shook a few more times. 3 figures appeared one after another. Naturally, they were Ling Shiqi, Delta Origi, and Yushu. When Old Blockhead saw 3 more people come out, his mouth was wide open. Even Old Bones, who was sitting at the back, stood up with a swooshed sound. His eyes flickered with surprise. "Ha ha ha ha." Old Blockhead suddenly threw his head back and laughed loudly. "The heavens bless my Blood Rope Pavilion, the heavens bless my Blood Rope Pavilion." When Ling Shiqi sensed that the centipede curse in Xiongming's body was still alive, he knew that the golden formation was the real way out, so he led Delta Origi and Yushu into the golden formation. However, just as they stood there, before they could even observe their surroundings, this madly laughing old man appeared, and he was at a loss for what to do. However, this also meant that they had finally left Blood Mist Island. That was good. Old Blockhead raised his hand, and a blood-red streak flew out of Xiongming's body and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Seeing this, Ling Shiqi's heart couldn't help but skip a beat, and he couldn't help but feel scared. If this old man had taken out the blood-red centipede as soon as he saw Xiongming, then the 3 of them would have stepped into another path of death. Old Blockhead continued, very good, very good. Is there anyone behind you?" Ling Shiqi and the others all shook their heads, but the vigilance in their eyes didn't decrease at all. The old man behind them nodded in satisfaction and said, "Don't worry, you're safe now." For some reason, this old man's words seemed to have a magical power that made Ling Shiqi and the others slowly let down their guard. "All right, since there's no one else, come with us." Old Blockhead waved his hand, and a gust of wind swept the 4 of them away. Before Ling Shiqi and the others could react, the scenery around them quickly receded, and in the blink of an eye, they were forcefully taken to another spacious room. When they stopped, they were still a bit shaken. Ling Shiqi took 2 deep breaths before he felt better and thought to himself, "I don't know what realm these 2 old men are at, I clearly didn't feel any aura from them." This room was empty, and there was only a medium-sized pool, but the water in the pool was dark green and bubbling. It didn't look like anything good. Old Blockhead brought them to the pool and said, "Go in." Ling Shiqi and the others looked at Old Blockhead in confusion. "Don't look at me like that, don't be ungrateful. The water in this pool is the Enrich secret spring. It's a treasure for refining poison and cultivating poison techniques. Just a random handful of them would cause many people to fight over them. Ling Shiqi and the others, if they went in, how could they survive?" Old Blockhead glanced at Old Blockhead and said, "If the Enrich secret spring meets the blood sea poison, the two will mix and become a supreme treasure for cleansing the body and tempering the blood. What you don't know is that every trace of spirit energy you absorb on Blood Mist Island contains the blood sea poison." Hearing this, Ling Shiqi and the others were shocked. Ling Shiqi was secretly surprised. "Doesn't that mean that we've already absorbed a lot of the blood sea poison in our bodies without us knowing? Although I don't know what it is, it can't be anything good." Old Blockhead said, "That's right, once you enter the Enrich secret spring, you can cleanse your body and be reborn. You must have used some improper methods to increase your strength on Blood Mist Island, right? I can take this opportunity to remove the hidden dangers for you." Ling Shiqi and the others looked at each other silently, but no one moved for a while. Old Blockhead saw this and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. Old Blockhead pulled a long face and said, "What, are you afraid that I'll trick you? Go in." He waved his hand and Ling Shiqi and the others were instantly pushed into the pool by an invisible force. With a few splashes, the four of them sank into the water. Ling Shiqi's body sank into the dark green water, and the moment he touched the water seeped into his body. He quickly looked inside himself and found that a thick blood mist had appeared in his body at some point. The blood mist and the green water intersected and suddenly transformed into little golden lights. The golden lights then merged into Ling Shiqi's sea of qi and flesh. He immediately felt the spirit energy in his body growing steadily, and his body's strength was also slowly increasing. Ling Shiqi knew that the two old men were not lying, and also understood that this was a rare opportunity. He quickly gathered his thoughts and closed his eyes to cultivate. Just as they were immersed in their cultivation, Old Bones said something. Chapter 129. Seeing Ling Shiqi's group of four enter a state of cultivation, Old Bones said, "Old Wood, aren't you in too much of a hurry? You didn't even ask for their names. You also didn't explain the situation of the blood-clad pavilion to them before throwing them in." "Ah." Old Wood scratched his head awkwardly. He knew that he was too impatient, but he immediately changed the topic. "Hey, it's not too late to talk about it after they come out. By the way, Old Bones, what do you think of these children?" Old Bones pondered for a moment and said, "Excellent in every aspect." "Oh." Old Wood looked at Old Bones with a bit of surprise. "I didn't expect them to receive such high praise from you. On the path of spirit cultivation, many people think that cultivation talent is the most important, but in reality, comprehension and temperament are the most important. These people were able to cultivate to the spirit transformation realm at the age of 13 or 14. It can be seen that their talents are excellent, but what I value more is their temperament. Especially when facing you and me just now, they always maintained vigilance. This is very good." Old Wood ridiculed, "It's rare to see you talk so much." Old Bones lowered his eyes and remained unmoved. Old Wood continued, "Then who do you think is the best among the four?" "These two." Old Bones pointed at two of them and said. The two he pointed at were Ling Shiqi and Delta Origi. Old Wood nodded as expected and said, "Who do you think is better?" "This girl's talent is the best I've seen in my life. It can be called a shocking talent. This youth's cultivation talent is not as good as hers, but his physical body is strong and his spiritual power has even opened a spiritual space. His future path is even wider. It can be said that each has their own merits. Old Bones said slowly. Then who do you think will last longer? Old Bones pondered for a moment and said, I can't say for sure. Old Wood laughed and said, then let's make a bet. Let's bet on who can last longer. I heard that you recently created a black bone doppelganger. Lend it to me for a few days to study. Humph, so it's my black bone doppelganger. Old Bones flicked his sleeves. Old Bones, you can't say that. Let's make a bet. If I lose, I'll lend you my gold. Old Bones raised his eyelids and looked at Old Blockhead in surprise. He was naturally aware that Big Gold was the old Blockhead's precious treasure, and it was a puppet that the old Blockhead had spent countless painstaking efforts to create. Normally, the old Blockhead wouldn't even let others take a look at it. Old Bones nodded. All right, I'll bet with you. Then I'll bet on this little girl. Old Blockhead hurriedly said as if he was afraid that Old Bones would go back on his word. Old Bones' eyelids drooped as he said, Fine, I'll bet on this young man. Then, he sat by the pool and dozed off, while Old Blockhead began to pace back and forth. Ling Shichi and the other three were still quietly staying in the pool, absorbing the Encher's secret spring. Their auras were getting stronger and stronger. A moment later, Delta Origi's spirit energy suddenly increased, and she directly stepped into the second level of the spirit transformation realm. Following closely behind were Yushu and Xiongming, and the last to break through was Ling Shichi. This was not the end. After about an hour, Delta Origi broke through to the third level of the spirit transformation realm. At this time, the other three were much slower, especially Ling Shichi, who only broke through after almost 2 hours. Seeing this, Old Blockhead revealed a smile and looked at Old Bones proudly. Old Bones' eyelids were still lowered and he didn't pay attention to him. Time continued to pass, and after 6 hours, Delta Origi's cultivation had reached the fourth level of the spirit transformation realm. However, her face was a bit red and she would occasionally reveal a painful expression. Yushu and Xiongming's cultivations were stuck at the peak of the third level of the spirit transformation realm, and they were unable to break through. Moreover, their bodies were a bit red, as if they had soaked in a hot pool for a long time. The most serious thing was that their bodies were still trembling slightly. It was obvious that they were enduring great pain. However, they clenched their teeth and persevered. They knew that this was the best time to break through to the fourth level of the spirit transformation realm. If they couldn't break through now, it would take a long time in the future. At this moment, Ling Shichi's state was a bit strange. His cultivation was also stuck at the peak of the third level of the spirit transformation realm, but his expression was very normal. There was no trace of pain on his face, and he even seemed to be enjoying it. That's right, Ling Shichi was indeed enjoying it at this moment. The specks of light formed by the fusion of the dark erosion spring and the blood sea venom could not only cleanse his body and strengthen his foundation, but they could also rapidly increase his spirit energy, causing his cultivation to soar like a rocket. In addition, the golden specks of light continued to fuse with his bones, meridians, and flesh, tempering his body. It was a comprehensive tempering from the inside out. That's why Ling Shichi was not in a rush to increase his cultivation. Instead, he used the 8 stones method to refine his body. At this moment, Old Wood stopped pacing back and forth, and Old Bones also stood up. Both of them looked at the 4 of them with bright eyes. Old Wood said seriously, "They are indeed worthy of coming out of the Blood Mist Island's secret realm. Just their tenacity is extraordinary. If they don't die, their future will be limitless. That brat Xiao Dao is not good at managing the sect, but his thoughts and vision are far better than ours." Originally, he thought that aside from the Delta Origi, the other 3 would have already been unable to bear the pain and left the pool. Old Bones nodded slightly, agreeing with him. Time passed very quickly, and after another half an hour, Yushu, and Xiongming finally broke through to the fourth level of the spirit transformation realm. It was also at this moment that they could no longer endure the pain and jumped out of the pool at the same time. When they came out and saw that the Ling Shiqi and Delta Origi were still in the pool, they frowned. They both knew that the longer they stayed in the pool, the more benefits they would obtain, but the pain would also become more intense. They came out first, which meant that they were not as good as the Ling Shiqi and Delta Origi. However, the two of them didn't think too much about it. They sat down and began to consolidate their cultivation, completely ignoring the two old men. Old Wood and Old Bones looked at each other and saw satisfaction in each other's eyes. It was within their expectations that Yushu and Xiongming would come out of the pool first. However, they didn't expect that their first reaction after coming out of the pool was not to ask questions or be jealous. Instead, they went straight to consolidate their cultivation. This made the two old men think even more highly of them. Then they turned their gazes to the Ling Shiqi and Delta Origi. Their bet was still going on. Time slowly passed, and Delta Origi broke through again. She was already at the fifth level of the spirit transformation realm. However, it looked like she wouldn't be able to last much longer. Ling Shiqi also gradually broke through to the fourth level of the spirit transformation realm. Although his cultivation did not increase quickly, his condition was not bad. Only now did his face begin to turn red. Old Wood's old face became more and more gloomy. He seemed to already know the result of the bet. Not long after, Delta Origi could no longer hold on and left the pool. After Delta Origi came out, she first glanced at Ling Shiqi in surprise. Then she also began to consolidate her cultivation like Yushu and Xiongming. Old Bones looked at Ling Shiqi, who was still leisurely soaking in the pool, and said, "Old Wood, you won't go back on your word, right?" Chapter 130. Hearing this, Old Wood's old face turned red. He coughed dryly and said, "This old man naturally won't break the contract. It's just that my gold has some problems recently. I'll lend it to you after it's repaired." Old Bones seemed to have long been accustomed to Old Wood's behavior of going back on his word. He didn't care much and only said a few words. Sure enough, gambling is like a person's character. Old Wood's face turned even redder, but he changed the topic again. "How long do you think this kid can last?" Old Bones looked at Ling Shiqi's red skin and said, "It should be soon." At this time, Ling Shiqi didn't know what was going on outside. All his thoughts were on cultivating his spirit energy and tempering his body. But gradually, he discovered a problem that gave him a headache. That was, his 8 stones horizontal training technique was approaching perfection. This 8 stones horizontal training technique was a rank 1 body refining technique. When it was cultivated to perfection, the physical strength was comparable to a spirit cultivator at the first level of the pure spirit realm. Ling Shiqi had now cultivated the 8 stones horizontal training technique to the highest level. In addition, he had cultivated many spirit techniques. Now, the spirit energy of his physical body was comparable to a spirit cultivator at the second level of the pure spirit realm. What gave him a headache was that without the support of the technique, he couldn't take the initiative to refine the golden light spots to strengthen his body. Such an opportunity was hard to come by. It was a pity to give it up like this. Ling Shiqi could only secretly shake his head. At this time, it was impossible for a more advanced body refining technique to fall from the sky for him. Next, he could only wholeheartedly improve his spirit energy. After an hour, Ling Shiqi began to show a painful expression. The two old men stared straight at him. After another hour, Ling Shiqi's body gradually trembled. The two old men's eyes were wide open. Obviously, Ling Shiqi's performance was far beyond their expectations. Delta Origi and the others also stopped their training. When they saw Ling Shiqi still in the pool, their expressions were very interesting. Delta Origi's eyes were glowing, Meng Ming's brows were tightly furrowed, and Yushu's jaw was about to hit the ground. At this moment, Ling Shiqi was indeed suffering from boundless pain. However, whether it was refining the demon blood or fusing the beast origin battle rune, the pain he experienced was far greater than what he was experiencing now. Therefore, he could still endure it. Boom! The spirit energy in Ling Shiqi's body surged and the spirit pressure around his body increased. His cultivation had finally broken through to the 5th level of the spirit transformation realm. Half an hour later, Ling Shiqi almost couldn't hold on any longer. Just as he was about to jump out, he suddenly had an idea. Then, a wave of spiritual energy emanated from between his eyebrows, and he carefully controlled this spiritual energy to envelop his body. Ling Shiqi immediately felt the pain lessen. He was overjoyed and immediately continued to cultivate. At this moment, the old man who was watching him suddenly sat down again. Old Wood swallowed his saliva and also sat down. They were very clear that Ling Shiqi wouldn't come out until his spiritual energy was exhausted. However, they never imagined that not only was Ling Shiqi's body strong, his spiritual energy was powerful, and he could even control it so finely. Even many spirit mages couldn't control spiritual energy to this degree. Delta Origi secretly clenched her fists, then sat down cross-legged and continued to cultivate. After that, the few of them seemed to have lost track of time. After an unknown period of time, a "pu" sound was heard. Ling Shiqi finally jumped out of the pool. His cultivation had already reached the peak of the 5th level of the spirit transformation realm. Ling Shiqi could clearly feel the abundant spiritual energy in his body, and he enjoyed this feeling very much. The two old men looked at him expressionlessly. They were already numb from the shock of Ling Shiqi. Old Wood said, "Kid, you're smart. In the end, you even used the Enrich secret spring to consolidate your cultivation." Ling Shiqi knew that the two old men in front of him were definitely not ordinary. He cupped his hands and said, "Seniors," unexpectedly. Before he could say anything, Old Wood waved his hand and said, "Okay, no need for this nonsense. Just call me Old Wood and Old Bone. Tell me what you're going to call yourselves." Ling Shiqi, Delta Origi, Yushu, Meng Ming. The four of them reported their names. Old Wood glanced at the four of them. His gaze lingered on Ling Shiqi for a moment before he continued to speak. "Since you were able to come out of the Blood Mist Island, you must be smart people. You should be able to more or less guess what the Blood Mist Island is." "That's right, the Blood Mist Island is actually a secret realm. It's a small space that our Blood Cloak Pavilion opened up after nearly 1,000 years of accumulation. The purpose is to cultivate peerless geniuses who gather talent, comprehension, temperament, and luck. That is, you." When Ling Shiqi heard this, even though he had already guessed it, when he truly knew the truth, a ripple still rose in his heart. "This old man knows that you've experienced many hardships on the Blood Mist Island, but which one of those who have not gone through untold hardships to achieve great things? Moreover, the resources you've enjoyed on the Blood Mist Island are extraordinary. The cultivation methods, spiritual skills, spirit stones, and medicinal pills are all very precious resources. Moreover, the Enrich secret spring and the blood sea poison are all heavenly treasures that can shock a region. You can enjoy them to your heart's content. You should know their benefits better than anyone else." Hearing this, Ling Shiqi and the others nodded inwardly. If the spirit-gathering realm was to draw qi into the body, it could be considered to have entered the door of spirit cultivation. The pure spirit stage was to purify spirit power and build a foundation. The spirit transformation stage was a process of accumulation. In the month after Ling Shiqi broke through to the spirit transformation stage, his cultivation progress was very slow. If he had cultivated step by step, he estimated that it would have taken him 2 to 3 months to reach the second layer of the spirit transformation stage. This was under the premise that the spirit power on the Blood Mist Island was extremely dense. It was clear how difficult it was to advance after the spirit transformation stage. However, the 4 of them had only cultivated in the pool for a few hours, and they had all reached the 4th and 5th layers of the spirit transformation stage. What a terrifying speed! These few short hours were equivalent to several years of their hard work. Thinking about it now, they still felt that it was somewhat inconceivable. Disregarding everything else, just this time was a great opportunity for them. Moreover, they all understood the meaning behind Elder Mu's words. At the beginning, a total of more than 10,000 people had been sent to the Blood Mist Island, and in the end, only the 4 of them had come out. They had indeed suffered a lot and even experienced life and death situations. In addition, the Blood Cloth Pavilion had used them as chess pieces and cultivated them like raising poisonous insects, which made them unhappy. However, what they had received was definitely far more than what they had paid. Therefore, they had no complaints. Seeing that they all knew what was going on, Elder Mu's eyes flashed with admiration and he continued, "Not only that, but after you enter the sect will also do its best to cultivate you. You are all smart children, so you should understand what this old man means." Then, Elder Mu pointed in a direction and said, "There are a few stone rooms over there. Go change your clothes and I'll take you back to the sect." The 4 of them nodded and walked over. After they entered the stone room, Elder Mu sighed. "The younger generation will surpass us in time." However, Elder Mu glanced at him and said, "You still haven't said anything about the Blood Cloth Pavilion." Elder Mu. Chapter 131. Thank you to Still Chi Refinement after 500 years, for the tip of 500 Chidian coins. Ling Shichi walked into the stone room and found that it was very simple. There was nothing but a stone bed, a table, and a chair. A few sets of clothes were neatly placed on the stone bed. Ling Shichi lowered his head and looked at himself. Originally, he was wearing an ink-flowing robe and a loose white robe. However, during the battle with the Blood Fiend, he activated the Beast Origin battle pattern and destroyed the white robe. Later, he also destroyed the ink robe when he resisted the snake head's venom. At this moment, Ling Shichi still had a few rags hanging on his body. He looked extremely miserable. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. Then he looked at the clothes on the bed. Maybe it was because he had been wearing black for too long, so he picked a black robe. After a short while, he changed and walked out of the stone room. He found that Yushu and Xiongming had already come out. Xiongming was wearing a dark green robe. He crossed his arms and didn't say a word. Yushu was wearing a white robe. However, his expression was a bit deep, which was different from his usual self. The last one to come out was Delta Origi. She was wearing a green robe casually. She didn't wear any makeup, which made her look even more beautiful. After the 4 came out, they returned to the pool together. Oldwood said, "Come with us first. We'll talk about it while we walk." The 4 could only follow. The sect that opened the Blood Mist Island and nurtured you guys is the Blood Robe Pavilion. When Ling Shichi heard the words, Blood Robe Pavilion, he felt that this sect wasn't a proper faction. As expected, Old Blockhead continued, "The Blood Cloak Pavilion is one of the 7 strongest sects in the world on the ranking of sects. It's also famous on the continent. It's the most powerful assassin faction in the Thunderfire dynasty. It has been passed down for over 1,000 years." At this point, Old Blockhead paused and looked at the 4 people's reactions. However, Ling Shichi and the other 3 didn't show any shock or admiration. Instead, they looked a bit dumb as if they didn't understand what he was talking about. This was indeed the case. The world sect ranking that Old Block had mentioned, the 7 invincible sects, the continent, and the dynasty, all sounded very powerful. But ever since Ling Shichi came to this world, he had been staying in the narrow secret realm of the Blood Mist Island. He knew nothing about the outside world. He had no idea what continent he was in, what dynasty he was in, or what year it was. Therefore, he wasn't interested in what old Blockhead said. Instead, he thought to himself, assassin force. Sure enough, it's not a proper sect. Seeing Ling Shiqi and the others like this, old Blockhead couldn't help but feel a little awkward. He opened his mouth and wanted to continue speaking. Old Bones stopped him in time. Suddenly, 4 thin booklets appeared in his hand and he threw them to Ling Shiqi and the others. Some things about the Blood Clothing Pavilion are recorded here. You can take a look for yourselves. Old Wood's mouth moved slightly at this moment, but he didn't make a sound. He condensed his voice and transmitted it into Old Bones' ears. Old Bones. You're undermining me. A person who doesn't even have a gambling sense, why would he need a platform? Not long after, the 2 old men brought Ling Shiqi and the others to a huge stone door. Old Bones said, "Get ready." Ling Shiqi and the others were all puzzled. What did they have to prepare for? Boom! Boom! The stone door was pushed open by Old Bones with a heavy sound. He then said, "Get ready to welcome the light." As soon as Old Bones finished speaking, the stone door was completely opened and a ray of sunlight shone in. A second ray, a third ray, a 100th ray. Countless rays of sunlight shone in. Ling Shiqi couldn't help but turn his head and subconsciously cover his eyes. However, he still took the initiative to welcome the long-awaited light. After they got used to it, they took the initiative to walk out of the stone door. Feeling the faint warmth of the sunlight on their bodies, Ling Shiqi felt even happier than reaching the 5th level of the spirit transformation realm. Because he hadn't seen sunlight for almost 2 years. After a long while, they finally recovered from that warm feeling and began to look around. Ling Shiqi looked around and found that they were at the top of a mountain. The strange thing was that this mountain looked like a pillar that pierced the sky. It was a bit like a pillar that had been enlarged countless times. He couldn't help but wonder, how do we get down? Ha! But at this moment, a sudden shout attracted his attention. Ling Shiqi turned around and saw Yushu running to the edge of the cliff and shouting loudly. There was even a faint echo coming back. Yushu then looked up at the sky and laughed. Ha 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 ha, ha. I'm finally out. I'm out. Ling Shiqi didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at Yushu. However, he didn't say anything. He knew that Yushu had too many things buried in his heart, and it was good to let them out. After a while, Yushu walked back with a relaxed expression. Ling Shiqi had a familiar smile on his face. Old Wood chuckled and said, "Kid, you're quite interesting. Let's go back to the sect." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his sleeve and a powerful gust of wind swept up Ling Shiqi and Delta Origi. In the next moment, Old Blockhead actually leaped down the cliff with them, and he stepped into the air and tore through the sky. Old Bone followed closely behind with Yushu and Hengming. At this moment, Ling Shiqi's heart was in turmoil. He was shocked and curious. He wanted to know what realm the old man who had carried him was at. Blood Cloak Pavilion, Blood Kill Hole. There were several people sitting in the hole. They were all dressed in blood-red robes and wore masks of various shapes. The masks covered their entire faces, not even revealing their eyes. It was impossible to see their appearances. There was one person sitting on the highest seat in the hole. There was only a single blade mark on his mask. This person was the current pavilion master of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, Hateful Blade. To Hateful Blade's left sat the vice pavilion master, Inkfrost Ghost. His mask was covered in irregular black ink, as if it was made from splashed ink. To Hateful Blade's right stood another person. His mask was carved with an eerie bone mountain. At this moment, he was carefully polishing a strangely shaped bone in his hand. He was the first elder of the Blood-Cloaked Pavilion, Bone Devil. Further down, there was a row of seats neatly arranged. Upon closer inspection, there were 9 of them. However, only 6 of them were seated. There were 3 empty seats, the first, second, and 8th seats. The 6 people were all sitting upright, not even daring to breathe loudly. Everyone in the hall was waiting. They were waiting for the 2 old men and the people they had brought with them. Not long after, 2 thunderous sounds rang out. Everyone turned to see Old Wood and Old Bone bringing Ling Shichi's group of 4 down from the sky. Chapter 132. Ling Shichi's group of 4 followed the 2 elders into the Bloodkill Hall. However, the 4 of them were still a bit dumbfounded. They were clearly still in shock at the 2 elders' heaven-defying abilities. When the people in the hall saw the 2 elders enter, they all stood up to welcome them. Hateful Blade and Inkfrost lowered their heads slightly. Bone Devil immediately put away the bone in his hand and respectfully bowed. The others also bowed. Old Blockhead casually waved his hand and condensed his voice into a line to explain the situation. Then he walked to a corner of the hall. After hearing the 2 elders' words, everyone's gaze fell on Ling Shichi. As soon as Ling Shichi entered the hall, he felt waves of gloomy air surge through his body, causing him to shiver. At the same time, several pairs of eyes instantly fell on him. Although they were clearly invisible, they made him feel as if there was a substantial pressure on him. It was as if there was a large stone pressing down on his heart, making it difficult for him to breathe. Ling Shichi secretly circulated his spirit energy and felt a bit better. He raised his head and saw the 3 people at the front. He thought to himself, according to the booklet, those 3 should be the Pavilion Master, Hateful Blade, the Vice Pavilion Master, Inkfrost, and the Disciplinary Elder, Bone Devil. As for those people, they should be the Blood Garment Pavilion's top assassins, the Netherworld Blood Garment Assassins. After the 4 of them stood still, Hateful Blade's cold voice rang out. You already know about what happened on Blood Mist Island. From now on, the 4 of you are disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Furthermore, the pavilion will use all of its resources to nurture you. Hearing this, Ling Shichi and the others didn't reveal any joy. This was because they had a question in their hearts. Just as Ling Shichi was hesitating about whether or not to ask, Hengming asked. What do we need to pay? Hateful Blade's face was covered by a mask, so his expression couldn't be seen. He only said one word, loyalty. Disciple Yushu greets the Pavilion Master. As soon as Hateful Blade finished speaking, Yushu directly knelt on the ground and said loudly. Disciple Hengming greets the Pavilion Master. Hengming quickly followed. Ling Shichi and Delta Origi looked at each other. Very good. In that case, Yushu, you will be my disciple. After Hateful Blade finished speaking, Yushu's body suddenly trembled. He raised his head in surprise. He understood that from now on, he was the direct disciple of the Pavilion Master. With the Pavilion Master's personal guidance and an endless supply of cultivation resources, it was as if he could already see a bright future ahead of him. He raised his head, cupped his fists and said, Disciple pays his respects to Master. Hateful Blade gently waved his hand and did not speak. Yushu obediently retreated to the side and secretly glanced at Ling Shichi and the others. He knew that among the 4, Ling Shichi and Delta Origi were the best, but the Pavilion Master chose him first, which made him feel strange. Delta Origi. This girl is fated to be with me, so she will be my disciple. Bone Demon's hoarse voice sounded. He had decided to take Delta Origi as his disciple. Delta Origi stepped forward and said crisply, Thank you, Master. The last to speak was the Vice Pavilion Master, Inkfrost Ghoul. He first looked at Ling Shichi and then turned to look at Hengming. He seemed to be hesitating. Ling Shiqi was also slightly nervous at this time. He was also a little uneasy that Hateful Blade and Bone Demon had given up on him one after another. According to the information he knew, the 3 people with the highest authority in the Blood Garment Pavilion were the 3 above. However, 4 of them had come out. If no one took in 2 disciples, then one of them would not be able to become a disciple of the highest authority. The remaining person would have to become a disciple of one of the underworld Blood Garment assassins. Although these people were also experts who could intimidate a region, there was still a big gap between them and the 3 above. However, things would always develop in a bad direction. Inkfrost Ghoul chose Hengming in the end. Ling Shiqi was the best in the Blood Mist Island's secret realm, but no one showed any interest in him. Ling Shiqi sighed in his heart, but his face was still calm. He might have less resources than the other 3 in the future, but he had the system. This mysterious existence made him confident that he would be stronger than them. Then again, he might have more freedom if he became a disciple of one of the underworld Blood Garment assassins. It was not unacceptable. Thinking of this, Ling Shiqi's face became even more calm. Seeing Ling Shiqi like this, Old Wood and Old Bone had a trace of admiration in their eyes. At this time, Hateful Blade said to the 6 underworld assassins, "You guys come." Whoosh! As soon as Hateful Blade finished speaking, one of them immediately stood up. His mask was a strong green demon. "I see that this kid's body is very strong. He's very suitable to walk the path of body cultivation. I'll take him." At this time, the person sitting in the 3rd seat stood up and said, "Ridiculous. Green Demon, your broken technique made you neither human nor ghost. You still want to harm others. Young man, I'm Leng Yu. You and I are quite fated. Why don't you become my disciple?" Leng Yu's mask faintly showed a gloomy expression. "Bullshit." At this moment, a deep voice suddenly came from outside the door. Then, a slightly plump man rushed into the hall in a hurry. The person instantly appeared in front of Ling Shiqi. He put his hands on his waist like a woman on the street who was about to quarrel. However, when he saw the 2 old men, he immediately bowed deeply. Old Bone nodded expressionlessly. The person immediately put his hands on his waist again and said to Leng Yu without any politeness, "He's not fated to be your disciple. I want this kid." At this time, Ling Shiqi also saw that there were dozens of faces with different expressions on the mask on the person's face. Upon closer inspection, those faces seemed to be alive. Some of their eyeballs were even moving slightly. It looked very strange and a little creepy. Leng Yu's body suddenly emitted a trace of coldness, and said coldly, "Wu Xiang, what do you mean? You don't understand what I mean. Brainless thing." Wu Xiang muttered in a low voice. However, although his voice was low, everyone present could hear it very clearly. Ling Shiqi couldn't see Leng Yu's expression, but he could imagine that Leng Yu's expression was not good at this moment. "Wu Xiang, you dare to be so arrogant in front of the 2 pavilion elders and pavilion master?" Leng Yu said in a low voice. Wu Xiang waved his hand and said, "Put away your little thoughts. In the Blood Clothing Pavilion, strength is respected. I'm stronger than you, so this kid will be my disciple. If you're not convinced, the 2 of us can go out and fight." Leng Yu seemed to choke. After a while, she squeezed out a sentence from between her teeth. "Humph, you only dare to be arrogant a little when Hua Luiyue isn't here." Wu Xiang laughed. You're using Hua Luiyue to pressure me. You should understand that as long as the 2 of us are here, you'll never be able to be arrogant." "Enough." Leng Yu opened her mouth to say something, but Pavilion Master Hen Dao spoke first. Wu Xiang and Leng Yu immediately closed their mouths and returned to their seats. Wu Xiang casually sat in the first seat. The others also didn't say anything. "This kid will be Wu Xiang's disciple." "Disperse," ordered Hen Dao. Ling Shiqi muttered inside, this Wu Xiang doesn't seem very reliable, but before he could recover, one of his arms was suddenly grabbed, and then the scene in front of him rapidly flew away. He had been directly dragged out of the blood-kill hall by Wu Xiang and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Chapter 133. After a while, Ling Shiqi was dragged by Wu Xiang to a place called Wu Xiang Palace. Ling Shiqi did not have time to observe the blood-clothing pavilion and was dragged along in a daze. Wu Xiang did not slow down after entering the palace. Along the way, he encountered several people in gray who respectfully called out, "Lord Wu Xiang," and looked at Ling Shiqi strangely. In the end, Wu Xiang directly dragged Ling Shiqi into a hall before putting him down. Ling Shiqi finally breathed a sigh of relief. His whole body was sore, especially his arms, which were almost numb. Wu Xiang put down Ling Shiqi and muttered to himself, "Fortunately, I came back in time. Otherwise, all the good seedlings would have been taken away. This boy is the last one left. He must have the worst aptitude. Alas, I was still one step too late." Ling Shiqi's eyes twitched a few times. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. You can just think this in your heart. You don't have to say it out loud. "Hey, by the way, what's your name again?" Wu Xiang suddenly asked. Ling Shiqi was speechless. "Disciple, Ling Shiqi." Wu Xiang said, "Ling Shiqi. The name is not very good, but it doesn't matter. Maybe it will be changed soon. Since you can come out of the Blood Fog Island, you must be extraordinary. Come, let me take a closer look." After saying this, Ling Shiqi immediately felt a deep gaze penetrating his body. It made him shiver, as if his secret had been seen through. "Oh. Interesting. You're not simple, kid." Wu Xiang suddenly stood up and walked around Ling Shiqi a few times. Finally, he leaned close to Ling Shiqi and whispered. Ling Shiqi's heart tightened when he heard this. He was really afraid that Wu Xiang would see through his secret. At this moment, the sound of light footsteps came from outside. Wu Xiang returned to his seat and pretended to be righteous. Ling Shiqi turned his head and saw a petite woman walk in. This woman was also dressed in red, and the sleeves and collar of her red dress were embroidered with black patterns. She was also wearing a mask on her face, and on it was a drawing of a soaring Qingyuan. After the woman came in, she subconsciously glanced at Ling Shiqi, and then respectfully said to Wu Xiang, "Master." When Ling Shiqi heard this, his heart skipped a beat. This woman was actually his senior sister. Wu Xiang nodded. "Sulwan, this is your junior martial brother, Ling Shiqi. In a few days, you will be in charge of guiding him in his cultivation." Sulwan turned to look at Ling Shiqi. She didn't seem too willing. At this moment, even though Ling Shiqi couldn't see Sulwan's face, he could clearly feel the disdain in her eyes. "Master, this disciple is currently trying to break through the bottleneck of the spirit aperture realm. I'm afraid I don't have time to take care of junior martial brother," Sulwan said with a bit of difficulty. Wu Xiang said, "You have to understand your master. Master has also been trying to break through the bottleneck. I really don't have time to guide Ling Shiqi." When she heard this, Sulwan's body trembled. She said in shock, "Master, you've already touched upon the bottleneck." Wu Xiang said in a low voice, "Correct. This disciple congratulates Master. I've only found the right path. Who knows when I'll be able to break through. Don't worry. Since you're guiding Ling Shiqi, I'll give you a 4-star mission. I won't treat you unfairly. This. Thank you, Master." Sulwan finally agreed. Wu Xiang waved his hand. "All right, take him away first." "Yes." Ling Shiqi, who was listening from the side, was confused. He could hardly understand what they were talking about. He only knew that he seemed to be despised by these two people. In the end, he could only ask to be excused and leave with Sulwan. Right after he left, Wu Xiang's voice suddenly appeared in his mind. Disciple, Master forgot to tell you. Your background is a top secret of the Blood Garment Pavilion. You absolutely cannot reveal it to anyone. If anyone asks, just say that I picked you up from the outside. When Ling Shiqi heard this, he helplessly nodded, indicating that he understood. At the same time, he felt that this cheap master of his was even more unreliable. After the two of them left, Sulwan said, Ling Shiqi, is it? Yes, senior sister Su. Ling Shiqi replied. I'll take you to formally enter the sect first. Watch more and ask less, understand? Junior martial brother understands. Also, my surname isn't Su. At this moment, Ling Shiqi felt a bit of a headache. He felt that since leaving Blood Mist Island, the people he met didn't seem to be easy to get along with. But there was nothing he could do. He could only obediently follow Sulwan. Because they were walking normally this time, Ling Shiqi met quite a few people. He was also in the mood to observe his surroundings. The Blood Garment Pavilion was located in a huge valley. The entire building leaned towards darkness. Along the way, everyone he saw was wearing a mask. Moreover, they were all in a hurry. Even if they bumped into someone, they wouldn't give you a second glance. Ling Shiqi was the only one with his face exposed. This made him have the urge to cover his face. According to the booklet Elder Bone gave him, the disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion had a strict hierarchy. First were the people wearing gray clothes. Their clothes looked very cheap and their masks only covered half of their faces. These people were the lowest level servant disciples. They were all in the pure spirit realm. Next were the people wearing black clothes. They all wore black masks that revealed their mouths and eyes. However, the masks didn't have any patterns. After a servant disciple broke through to the spirit transformation realm and successfully completed an assassination mission, they would be promoted to a black-clothed assassin. From Ling Shiqi's point of view, the black-clothed assassin was equivalent to an outer disciple of an ordinary sect. They weren't valued very much. However, the number of black-clothed assassins was also the highest. This was because the next realm would block most of them outside the door. That was the 4 realms of heaven and man. The 4 realms of heaven and man were Spirit Pulse Realm, Spirit Aperture Realm, Spirit Astral Realm, and Unity of Heaven and Man. The Spirit Pulse Realm was the next realm after the Spirit Transformation Realm. However, most spirit cultivators would be stuck in this realm and wouldn't be able to cross it in their lifetime. The so-called 4 realms of heaven and man meant to break away from the body of a mortal and become an innate body. In fact, whether it was the spirit gathering realm, pure spirit realm, or spirit transformation realm, they were all just building a foundation and accumulating a foundation. Even if a person's aptitude was poor, if they diligently cultivated for a few decades, they could still cultivate to the peak of the spirit transformation realm. However, to break through to the Spirit Pulse realm, which was above the Spirit Transformation realm, one must have extraordinary talent. In the Blood Robe Pavilion, only spirit cultivators of the Spirit Pulse realm had the qualifications to become Blood Robe Assassins and become inner disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion. In the outside world, spirit cultivators of the Spirit Pulse realm could barely be called experts. However, in the Blood Robe Pavilion, they were only the lowest level of Blood Robe Assassins. This was the foundation of a peak power. The clothes and masks of the Blood Robe Assassins were clearly very exquisite. Moreover, each person's mask had different patterns. Only the color of the patterns on the cuffs and collars were different. Those embroidered with black patterns were at the Spirit Pulse realm, those with silver patterns were at the Spirit Aperture realm, and those with gold patterns were at the Spirit Astral realm. The most frightening people in the Blood Robe Pavilion were the 9 Netherworld Blood Robe Assassins. They were all experts at the unity of heaven and man realm. Ling Shiqi's chief master, Wu Xiang, was one of the 9 Netherworld Blood Robe Assassins. Ling Shiqi observed as he walked, matching these people with the information in his mind. Not long after, he followed Sulwan into a large hole. Under her lead, Ling Shiqi quickly entered the register and received his identity token, 2 sets of black clothes, a black mask, and a monthly salary. From this moment on, he officially became a Blood Robe Pavilion assassin. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.